Welcome to Creepy Vibes. Tonight, we're packing up and hitting the Texas highways, but not the way you remember them. These aren't scenic drives or happy roadside stops. These are 20 true Texas road trip stories that veered off course into something darker, from deserted exits with no way back to strangers who know too much about you. Out here, miles can stretch into forever, and the next turn might be your last. But before we begin, here's something strange. Most viewers make one huge mistake. They leave without subscribing, and they miss the creepiest, most bone-chilling stories that only the bravest can handle. Don't be one of them. Hit that subscribe button now. Because once we get rolling, there's no pulling over dots, so tell me, where are you watching from, and what time is it there? Out on these roads, time doesn't always run the same, and sometimes it runs out. Now buckle up, check your mirrors, and keep your eyes on the shoulder. The first mile is always the quietest. I used to think the creepiest things that could happen on a road trip were pretty simple: getting lost at night, running out of gas in the middle of nowhere, maybe hitting a deer. Stuff that sucks, but that you can explain. After what happened on I-35 2 summers ago, I know better. My buddy Ethan and I had been driving since morning, heading back up to Dallas from Austin after a weekend visiting some friends. It was late June, the kind of Texas heat that bakes you from the inside out even with the AC blasting, and the air outside was shimmering over the asphalt. The interstate was busy enough for a Sunday, but not clogged, mostly long-haul trucks, RVs, and people trying to make it home before dark. We just passed Waco when I noticed the first time. A silver Toyota Camry slid into the lane behind us and stayed there. It didn't feel weird at first. Highway driving is just a constant shuffle of cars. But after 20 minutes, it was still back there, hanging the same distance behind us. No matter how much I sped up or slowed down, when it finally passed on the left, I got a quick look at it and froze. Same year, same model as my car. Same dull scrape on the driver's side door, right above the handle. An old mark from when I was shopping. Cart got away from me at a Walmart in Denton. My eyes dropped to the back bumper and my stomach knotted. Same sticker too. A faded little "Keep Austin Weird" decal I'd slapped on years ago. Ethan noticed my silence. "What?" I just muttered. "That car looks like mine." He leaned, overlooked, and snorted. "Lot of Camrys out there, man. Chill." Maybe he was right. I didn't get the plate number until it slowed just enough for me to catch it in the rear view. It was my plate. Every letter, every number. Texas tags, same county. I actually laughed then, a dry, nervous laugh, because my brain couldn't make sense of it. "That's impossible," I said out loud, but the words felt flimsy in my mouth. The Camry didn't pass. It slid back behind us and settled in tight. Too tight. Close enough I could see the reflection of my brake lights in its windshield. I moved to the right lane and slowed down, hoping it would go around. It didn't. It slowed with me, hanging there like it was tethered. Ethan turned in his seat too. "Look, that's creepy," he admitted. The miles kept ticking by. Hills, billboards for barbecue joints and antique malls. The same 3 country stations cycling static as we got farther from the cities. The Camry never wavered. By the time we hit exit 314, I was done playing whatever game this was. The exit ramp was coming up one of those long stretches that curve off the highway into a sleepy town you can see from the interstate. I flicked the blinker, dropped down the ramp, and took the turn too fast. I figured if they followed, I'd pull into a gas station, maybe flag down someone. Sure enough, the silver Camry followed. We passed through a short strip of closed businesses and faded awnings. The air here smelled different, dry and dusty, like hot wood and oil. I spotted a gas station ahead, the kind with one flickering light over the pump and an ice chest out front. I swung in hard. The Camry stayed in the road. I sat there, engine running, watching in the side mirror as it slowed. The driver's window rolled down. That's when my chest went tight. The man behind the wheel looked exactly like me. Not a little bit. Not, oh. He has the same haircut. Exactly. Same nose, same jawline, same scruff on the chin I'd meant to shave 2 days ago. Even the same blue t-shirt with the frayed collar. He didn't smile or wave. He just stared. Ethan was dead silent in the seat beside me. I rolled my window down halfway. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to hear him call out something, an explanation, a prank reveal, whatever. But he didn't say a word. His lips didn't move. Then, without warning, his mouth stretched into a grin that didn't look human. It was too wide, pulling the skin tight until it seemed it would split. His teeth were straight, white, but too many of them, like there were extra where there shouldn't be. I slammed the truck into reverse without thinking, nearly clipping the pump, and shot out of the lot. When I hit the highway again, my heart was pounding hard enough to make me dizzy. I didn't look back until we'd gone 10 miles. The Camry was gone. We didn't talk for the rest of the drive. Both of us kept checking the mirrors, jumping every time headlights appeared behind us. When I pulled into my driveway that night, something caught my eye. Parked across the street, half hidden under the shadow of a tree, was a silver Toyota Camry. Same dent, same sticker. And when I turned to look in my living room window, the reflection looking back wasn't mine. It was a Thursday night in late August, one of those sticky Texas evenings where the heat doesn't die with the sun. My wife, Claire, and I were driving back to Austin from visiting her sister in Dallas. We'd taken I-35 more times than I could count, enough to know every gas station, every billboard, and every stretch of dark road between the big cities. The highway at night had a certain comfort to it, constant movement, the familiar hum of tires on asphalt, the occasional flash of an 18-wheeler's headlights in the rear view. It felt predictable, safe. That night, though, it didn't stay that way. We just passed Waco a little after 10:30 when the first set of orange DPS cones came into view. A trooper's SUV sat off to the side with its lights spinning lazily, casting red and blue ripples across the empty fields. There were no workers, no road crew, just a single arrow board blinking us toward the right-hand exit. I'd seen construction detours before, but this felt sudden, unplanned. No warning signs a mile back, no road work ahead. Just cones. I don't remember seeing anything about construction on the way up, Claire said, leaning forward. In her seat. Me neither, I replied, slowing down as the cones funneled us off the highway onto a narrow farm-to-market road. The exit sign was unlit, weather-worn, and completely blank, no number, no name. I only caught the faded outline where letters had once been bolted on. The road bent sharply, then straightened into a 2-lane ribbon that cut through miles of pitch-black farmland. My headlights pushed the darkness aside in a pale yellow cone. But beyond that, it was just an ocean of black. Not even the usual glow from distant towns. No barns, no lit windows. Nothing. We drove in silence for the first 10 minutes. The GPS on my dash stubbornly trying to reroute us back to the interstate. It showed us floating through empty grid lines, no road name, just a thin gray track that vanished ahead. Claire kept glancing at her phone. This is weird. I've got no service. I checked mine. Nothing. Not even one flicker of a bar. Then the road began to curve again, a long, lazy bend that felt familiar. I thought I recognized the same leaning fence post we'd passed minutes earlier, the one with rusted barbed wire hanging loose. I shook it off as Deja Vu farm roads have a way of looking the same out here. But 5 minutes later, we hit the exact same bend, same fence post, same warped oak tree leaning over the ditch. Claire noticed it too. Didn't we already come through here? I tried to keep my voice casual. Maybe there's more than one like it. We'll just follow this until it feeds back to the highway. Another 20 minutes and 2 more curves later, my confidence was slipping. The air felt heavier now, humid in a way that made the back of my neck damp. Even the crickets had gone silent. It was just the steady hum of the tires, the occasional pop of gravel under the wheels, and the sound of Claire's breathing slower, sharper. The third time we passed that same fence post, she reached for my arm. We're going in circles. No, I said, but my voice cracked a little. No, we can't be. We've been driving straight. That was when the road widened unexpectedly, opening into a stretch with a lone wooden bridge spanning a dry creek bed. The planks creaked under the tires. Halfway across, I caught movement in my peripheral vision, something standing just below the bridge, in the shadows. Tall, too tall for a person. Its head tilted slowly as we passed overhead. I didn't tell Claire. I just pressed the gas a little harder until we were over and back into the dark. The GPS was now completely useless. The car's clock said 11:52, but the drive from Waco to Austin was only supposed to be an hour and a half. We should have been nearly home. Instead, the needle on the fuel gauge was sinking, and the road kept stretching on with no turns, no intersections. Claire finally broke the silence. Do you hear that? I turned down the AC fan. There it was, behind the engine noise, beneath the whine of the tires, a faint clicking sound. Slow, irregular, like fingernails on metal. It seemed to come from the back of the car. I eased my foot off the accelerator, letting us roll, but the clicking stayed with us. Faster when we sped up, slower when we slowed down. Claire twisted in her seat to look out the back window, then whipped forward again, pale. What? I asked. She shook her head too quickly. Just drive. The road dipped, rose again, and then suddenly there it was, the interstate ahead, glowing with a steady stream of headlights. Relief hit me in a rush. We merged back on without a single cone in sight, like the detour had never existed. But as we settled into the middle lane, something felt wrong. The traffic around us seemed off. No Samus, no newer cars. Just older sedans and pickup trucks, all from at least 20 years ago. The paint jobs were faded. The license plates were the old black and white Texas style. And the drivers, those I caught glimpses of, looked wrong. They stared straight ahead, unblinking, their faces slack like mannequins. One man's mouth was open, too wide, like his jaw had unhinged. Claire had gone completely silent beside me, her hands locked tight in her lap. When we finally saw a green exit sign for Austin, I glanced at my phone. I froze. The lock screen said Tuesday, August 14th. We had left Dallas on Thursday, August 23rd. The date was 10 days earlier. I pulled into our driveway around 12:40. The house looked exactly the same as when we'd left, except the porch light was on. We never left it on. Claire didn't wait for me. She went inside without a word. I followed, the air inside feeling stale, heavier somehow. On the kitchen table was a folded Waco Tribune newspaper. The date printed at the top was Tuesday, August 14. My phone hasn't updated since. No texts, no emails. Just the same date and the same battery percentage frozen. The gas station receipts in my wallet are all from 10 days ago, and the car's odometer shows we only drove 46 miles the entire trip. We haven't talked about it. But last night, I woke up around 3 o'clock and saw Claire standing at the bedroom window, looking out toward the street. When I asked what she was doing, she didn't answer. She just whispered, "We'll have to take that road again soon." And in the reflection on the glass, her mouth didn't move when she said it. It was a late August evening in Texas. the kind where the sky goes from bruised purple to pitch black in what feels like seconds. The air was still hot even after dark, clinging to you like something alive. I was driving back to Dallas from San Antonio with my roommate Caleb after visiting his cousin. We'd been on the road for hours, and the kind of lazy, restless quiet had settled in where neither of us felt much like talking. The hum of the tires and the low growl of the air conditioner filled the cab. The plan was simple: stop for gas and snacks at the Buc-ee's off I-35 near Temple, stretch our legs, then push through the last leg home. That Buc-ee's is massive, the kind of place you can get lost in, and it's always lit up like a football stadium. I've stopped there a dozen times without a second thought, but that night, something was different. We spotted him about a half-mile from the turnoff. He was standing in the thin patch of grass between the access road and the highway, facing traffic, tall, thin, wearing a faded denim jacket despite the heat, his hands shoved deep in the pockets. No bag, no sign. Just standing there like he'd been dropped from the sky. "What the hell is this guy doing?" Caleb muttered, leaning forward to get a better look as we passed. The man's head turned just enough for us to see his face in the glow of the headlights. Pale skin, long greasy hair that stuck to his cheeks, and a strange kind of grin, not wide, not happy, just knowing. We didn't stop, not even close. I've seen too many horror stories online that start with, "We picked up a hitchhiker." I wasn't about to be that idiot, but as we turned off the access road toward Buc-ee's, Caleb swore under his breath. "Did you see his hands?" "What about them?" I asked. "They were shiny, like wet or something." We pulled into the lot, which was busy even for 10 p.m., and parked in the far end. We both went inside, grabbed sodas, beef jerky, and some chips. It was bright and loud, and their country music blaring, the smell of barbecue sandwiches, chatter of families and truckers. By the time we walked back out, the encounter with the guy on the roadside had already started to fade from my mind, until Caleb stopped, dead halfway to the truck. "Tell me you locked the doors," I frowned. Of course I did, but I saw it instantly: smears of greasy handprints running down the rear passenger door. Big, deliberate prints. The kind that come from palms pressed flat and dragged downward, leaving streaks on the paint. "They weren't there when we parked," Caleb said. "No kidding," I muttered, scanning the lot. There were people moving between pumps, couples laughing, kids skipping toward the entrance. No one looked like him. We climbed in fast, locking the doors as soon as they shut. I checked the back seat out of pure instinct, even though I knew it was empty. I started the engine, trying to laugh it off. "Maybe some kid messed with us," I said, but my voice didn't sound convinced. We pulled out of Buc-ee's and back onto the access road, merging north onto I-35. For a few miles, it was normal. Caleb unwrapped a bag of jerky. I sipped my Coke. The air conditioner whined. Then he froze, jerky halfway to his mouth. "What's that on the dash?" I glanced over. Wedged neatly between the windshield and the dashboard vent was a Polaroid photograph. Neither of us had put it there. I pulled it out slowly, my stomach twisting before I even saw the image. It was us, Caleb and me, in my truck, but we were sleeping. My head was tilted against the window. His chin was on his chest. The shot was framed from inside the cab, taken from the center console area like someone had been sitting in the back seat. I slammed the brakes and swerved onto the shoulder, hazard lights flashing. Caleb's breathing had gone shallow. "This is a joke, right?" he said, his voice high and tight. "Look at the clothes we're wearing," I snapped. "That's tonight." We tore through the truck, checking under the seats, the bed, everywhere. Nothing. No sign anyone had been inside. And yet the photo existed. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold it. "Let's just drive," I said, throwing the picture on the passenger floorboard. The rest of the trip was a blur. We didn't see him again on the highway. We didn't stop until we pulled into our apartment's parking lot under the yellow glow of the streetlights. We got out, checked the doors, checked the back seat one last time. All clear. Inside. I poured 2 whiskeys without asking and handed one to Caleb. We didn't talk much. Just sat there, staring at the TV without seeing it. It was only when I went to bed that I realized the smell in the truck had followed me inside. A faint, sour mix of sweat and oil. It clung to my shirt, to my hair. I showered, but when I lay down, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the building made my muscles tense. Around 3 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. No words, just an image. The same Polaroid from earlier. Only now, in the background, through the truck's back window, you could see him. The hitchhiker. His face pressed to the glass, smiling. I didn't respond. I just turned the phone off and lay in the dark, trying not to breathe too loudly. The next morning, Caleb was gone. His bed looked slept in, but there was no note, no text. His phone was still on the counter, dead. The truck was in the lot, keys on the seat, and there was another Polaroid on the driver's side dash. It was of me, sleeping in my bed last night. And behind me, in the dark corner of the room, was that same pale face, smiling. It was somewhere past 11 when the rain stopped and the air turned that sticky kind of humid that makes the steering wheel feel like it's sweating in your hands. We'd been on I-37 for hours, the highway stretching like a ribbon between Corpus and San Antonio, headlights cutting tunnels in the dark. My girlfriend, Sarah, sat slouched in the passenger seat, her head leaning against the glass, earbuds in, phone glowing faintly in her lap. The plan had been to make Mathis by midnight and crash at the Motel 6 before heading to see her parents in Beeville. That plan went sideways about the time Google Maps decided the interstate was congested and suggested a quicker route along some farm-to-market road. I'd never heard of .fm 666. I remember smirking when the number came up on the screen. Of course, I muttered, because nothing bad ever happens on a road with that number. Sarah stirred but didn't really wake. I tapped the voice prompt. Sure, whatever, reroute. The turnoff came quick. 2 reflective green signs, a faded Chevron station squatting in the dark, and a narrow strip of asphalt that seemed to disappear into the black fields. The first mile was nothing. A single lane each way, broken yellow line, no other headlights. I passed the 1-mile marker, white and reflective against the weeds, then the 2-mile marker, then 3. I didn't notice it at first, but after about 10 minutes, Sarah sat up and said, "Why are they counting down?" I frowned. "What?" She pointed through the windshield. Another marker slid past. Mile 47. I slowed a little. Huh, that's weird. Maybe we're going southbound and they count from the other end. Sarah leaned forward in her seat, watching as the next one came into view. Mile 46. We drove on. The numbers kept dropping. 42, 40-1. By mile 39, I realized something else. The gas gauge hadn't moved. We'd been driving for 20 minutes, and it was still stuck at exactly half a tank. You think the gauge is broken? I asked. Sarah didn't answer right away. She was watching the dark fields beyond the road, her eyes wide in a way that made my skin tighten. It's not just the gas. There's no sound. I lifted my foot off the pedal. The hum of the tires was gone. No wind. No engine. Just silence pressing against the windows like a held breath. I tapped the gas. The car surged forward, but it was like flooring it in a dream-smooth slow, not quite real. The GPS chimed. Continue straight for 37 miles. Sarah swore under her breath. 37 from what? We've been going for, then. The dashboard clock flickered. 11:22. 11:22, 11:22. Over and over until the numbers just stopped. "Let's turn around," Sarah said. "Yeah," I said, but my voice didn't sound like mine. I slowed, looked for a place to U-turn, but the road's edges were lined with steep ditches and a row of thick, tangled brush on either side. I drove until we found a driveway, gravel, rusted cattle gate, no lights from any house. I swung the wheel hard, made the turn, and the headlights washed over a green sign. FM 666. Mile 50. Sarah's voice cracked. We turned around. I pressed the gas harder than I meant to. The sign vanished in the rear view, replaced by darkness. The numbers climbed again, 51, 52, but the silence stayed. And so did the gauge at half. After a while, the mile markers started going down again. Sarah was gripping her knees like she was holding herself together. "We're not getting off this road," the GPS chimed. "Continue straight for 37 miles. The air in the car changed then. Heavier, hotter. I glanced in the mirror and saw something in the red glow of the taillights. Figures. Maybe a dozen, walking along the road behind us. They weren't waving or chasing, just walking. Their heads turned toward the car as one. I pressed harder on the gas. The speedometer climbed past 70, but the road didn't change. Fields, brush. Mile markers counting down from 30-7. Sarah whispered, "They're getting closer." I didn't want to look, but I did. The figures were closer now, their faces pale in the taillights. Too pale, eyes black and wet, like holes in fresh asphalt. The GPS chimed again. "Continue straight for 37 miles. I yelled at it to shut up, but it just repeated the same line, each word slower, deeper, like someone else was speaking through the phone. The road ahead shimmered, heat haze in the dark, and then the markers were in the single digits. 8, 7. The figures were gone from the mirror. I almost let out a breath until something shifted in the back seat. Sarah turned, and her scream cut through the silence like tearing cloth. I caught it in the rear view, a man sitting behind me, his clothes wet, hair plastered to his skull. His skin was gray and smooth like river clay, and his mouth hung open wider than it should, stretching until it split the skin at the corners. "Continue straight for 37 miles, he said in a voice that came from everywhere at once. I swerved. Hard, the tires shrieking on the asphalt. The man didn't move. His head tilted, eyes black and bottomless. The mile marker passed. Mile 0. For a heartbeat. Everything was gone, the road, the car. Sarah. I was standing in a field under a sky with no stars, the air thick with the smell of burned oil and wet earth. Shapes moved in the dark around me, whispering words I didn't understand. One of them brushed my arm, and it was like touching something alive that had been dead too long. Then the headlights were back. The wheel in my hands, Sarah sobbing beside me. The GPS was silent. The mile marker read mile 64 and the gas gauge had dropped to a quarter. We didn't talk until we reached Mathis. I pulled into the Motel 6 lot, and the first thing I noticed was the dashboard clock. 11:22. It was still raining. When we got to our room, Sarah locked the door, closed the curtains, and sat on the bed without a word. I went to wash my face. The mirror over the sink was streaked with muddy handprints. There were 37 of them. We were driving back from Austin after my cousin's engagement party, one of those rare summer nights where the air stayed heavy and damp even after the sun went down. The whole weekend had been a blur of barbecue smoke, Lone Star beer, and my family's particular brand of half playful, half judgmental ribbing. By the time we packed up the car and pointed it north toward Waco, we were already half asleep from the heat and the miles. There were 4 of us in the car, me, my girlfriend Sarah, my best friend Cole, and his girlfriend Renee. We'd taken my old Ford Explorer, the one I've had since high school, because it had the most room for the overnight bags and coolers. The AC worked about as well as you'd expect for a truck built in '02, which meant the windows were down most of the time, letting the warm night air push in against us. The route was familiar. We'd done this drive a dozen times. From Austin, up 35, through Temple, and home. But a few miles south of Waco, we hit one of those bright, orange detour signs, white letters peeling off in the glow of the headlights, telling us the highway was closed ahead. There were cones and flashing amber lights and a couple of DPS cruisers blocking the on-ramp, so there was no ignoring it. The sign pointed us toward some farm-to-market road that cut east. We didn't think much of it. Cole pulled out his phone and tried to get the map to load, but reception was garbage. The GPS spun and lagged, then froze. I kept driving, following the little reflective arrows tacked to telephone poles. The road narrowed, then bent eastward. Somewhere out there in the dark, beyond the tree line, was the Brazos River. It wasn't until we saw the green sign, Brazos River in faded white letters, that Sarah sat up from her half-doze. "Wait," she said. "I didn't know there was a bridge out this way." Neither did I. The thing rose up out of the dark like it had been dropped there from another time. It wasn't one of those clean concrete spans you see now. It was steel and rivets, black and hulking, the trusses arching over us like ribs. The paint had peeled away decades ago, and the whole thing looked slick in the moonlight, as if it had just been pulled dripping from the river. No streetlights, no other cars, just the two-lane blacktop leading us straight onto it. As soon as we rolled onto the steel grate of the bridge, the radio fizzed. We'd been listening to some scratchy alt-rock station out of Waco, but it cut out mid-song. The static was sharp, like someone tearing a sheet of tinfoil right next to your ear. I reached for the dial, figuring the interference was just from the metal structure, but before I could touch it, a voice came through. Not a DJ, not a song. Just a man's voice, deep, slow, and steady. He spoke like he was reading from something. But there was no music bed, no station bumper, nothing but the low hiss behind him. "Michael Allen Reed," he said. It took me a second to realize he was saying my name. My full name, my middle name. The one only my mom used, and only when I'd done something that pissed her off. "You will drown," the voice continued. "Mouth open, lungs filling with the water you begged to keep out. There will be no light. When it happens, the current will take you." I felt the wheel twitch in my hands. "What the hell?" I muttered. Cole leaned forward from the back seat. "Did he just?" Before he could finish, the voice spoke again. "Sarah Lynn Marshall," it said. Sarah's head snapped toward the dash. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no. You will burn," the voice told her. "Your skin will split, your blood will hiss to steam. You will scream, but no one will come." The air inside the truck felt wrong, heavier, like the heat had gotten thicker. My knuckles went white around the fender around the wheel. Then, Cole Matthew Jennings. Cole's breath caught. "You will fall," the voice said, "and your bones will not break at first. You will be awake long enough to feel them splinter under your weight." I glanced at the rearview mirror. His eyes were wide, his lips trembling. Renee had started crying softly before the voice even said her name. Renee Marie Hellbrook. It intoned. "You will be taken apart," the voice told her, "piece by piece, and you will see each part of yourself in someone else's hands." Number. One spoke after that. I tried the dial again, flipping through every frequency, but it didn't matter. Every station, from the lowest AM to the highest FM, carried that same voice, and now it wasn't just names. It was whispering things, dates, places, numbers. I didn't understand them, but Sarah kept shaking her head and saying, "Stop, just stop." The bridge seemed longer than it should have been. The steel trusses went on and on. The Brazos below was just a black sheet, no moonlight touching it, no sound of water moving. When the end of the bridge finally came into view, I pressed the gas harder. The moment the tires hit pavement on the far side, the voice cut off. The rock station came back in mid-song, like nothing had happened. We didn't say much the rest of the way home, but that wasn't the end. 3 days later, the first one came true. Cole had been doing some side work on a billboard outside Hillsboro. The scaffolding gave way. He fell 30 feet. His neck and back broke instantly, but the coroner's report said he had lived for at least a minute after the fall. 2 weeks after that, Sarah's apartment building caught fire. They said it was an electrical fault in the wall behind her stove. She never made it out. Renee left town. No one's seen her since, and me? I've been avoiding the water. I haven't showered in weeks, just sponge baths in the sink. I can't bring myself to drive anywhere near the Brazos. But last night, the radio in my apartment clicked on by itself, and that same voice, calm and patient, said, "Michael Allen Reed, soon." It was after midnight when we rolled off US 90 West, somewhere between Del Rio and Uvalde, looking for a place to fill up. The stretch of highway we'd been on was black as tar and twice as suffocating, the kind of Texas night where even the crickets sound reluctant. My girlfriend Jess sat slouched in the passenger seat, feet on the dash, scrolling on her phone with that dim blue glow lighting her face. We'd been driving for hours, heading west toward Big Bend for what we thought would be a weekend getaway. Our gas gauge had dipped under a quarter, and with the nearest known station miles back, I was starting to sweat, not from the heat, but from the feeling that this road wasn't meant for being stranded on, when I saw the green reflective sign, fuel. 1 mile, I felt an almost physical wave of relief. Jess perked up too, mostly because she'd been bugging me to stop for snacks. The turnoff led us down a short gravel drive that crunched under the tires, opening into a dim lot with a single pump island in the middle. The overhead canopy lights flickered like a dying bug zapper, and beyond it, there was a squat, rectangular building with a faded sign that read gas and goods in peeling red paint. The parking lot was empty, and the pump had the old-style mechanical dials, the kind you barely see anymore except in ghost towns or roadside museums. Jess made a face. "This place is creepy as hell." "It's fine," I said, though I wasn't convinced. "We'll fill up and go." When I pulled up next to the pump, I saw the numbers on the display already spinning like someone had left it running. Except there was no hose in the cradle. It was just hanging, swaying slightly, nozzle dribbling nothing. I killed the engine and got out. The night air hit me with a thick smell of hot asphalt and something else like copper and mildew, sharp enough to make me pause. "Hello?" I called toward the building just to make sure someone was around. There was movement in the lit window near the door, and a man stepped into view. He looked to be in his 50s, thin, with a face carved into permanent creases and a worn ball cap pulled low. He opened the glass door with a slow push, like the Fae. Hinges were rusted. His voice was calm but strange, a little too evening. "You need gas?" "Yeah," I said. "Pump out there looks like it's already running, though." The man smiled without showing teeth. "Ain't running, just keeps count, always has." I nodded, not sure what to say to that, and pulled my wallet out. "You take card?" He shook his head. "Cash?" Another shake. "We don't do that kind of payment here." Jess had rolled down her window, listening. "Then how the hell are we supposed to pay?" The man's smile widened slightly. "We take something else, something you can't get back." I laughed a little, thinking maybe he meant pawnable items. "Like collateral? Jewelry?" He looked me dead in the eyes. "Not exactly." For a few seconds, the only sound was the electric hum of the flickering lights. The man stepped forward, closer to the pump, and glanced at Jess in the passenger seat. "One of you comes inside. We'll make the trade, and you'll get your gas." Jess muttered, "Absolutely not," and sat back, arms crossed. I looked at the gauge again, just under an eighth now, thanks to the last incline. We didn't have a choice unless we wanted to risk running out in the middle of nowhere. I told her to stay put and headed toward the building. Inside, the place was dimmer than it had looked from outside. The air smelled like a mix of dust, old, motor oil, and something faintly sweet, almost like spoiled fruit. Shelves lined the walls, but they weren't stocked with anything I recognized: glass jars filled with cloudy liquid, bundles of dried plants, little paper packets with no writing on them. The counter had no register, just a battered notebook and a single, heavy-looking metal box. The man closed the door behind me. "We can take something from you," he said softly. "A memory. A piece of time. You choose?" I blinked. "What?" He leaned on the counter. "A year from your life. Or one you've already lived. You won't remember it after. You'll just lose it." I stared at him, waiting for the joke. None came. His eyes were dark and steady, and my stomach turned in a way that made me want to bolt back to the car. "That's ridiculous," I said. "You're messing with me." He didn't reply, just reached for the metal box and slid it toward me. "Hand over the year. Get your gas. You can leave after." The strangest part was that my skin prickled, like I already knew what he meant deep down. Like some part of me understood the offer and was afraid to think about it too hard. I backed away. "Forget it. We'll find another station." The man didn't stop me, didn't call after me, just stood there watching as I left. I got in the car, told Jess we were heading out. I put the key in the ignition, turned it, and the gauge still showed almost empty. We pulled back onto the gravel road, aiming to reconnect with US 90, but after a few minutes of driving, I realized we weren't passing the same landmarks we'd seen before. The road seemed longer, stretching under the tires with no end. Jess was fidgeting, glancing at the gauge. "We're gonna run out." The needle didn't move. 10 minutes became 20. The darkness outside felt thicker somehow, the air inside the car heavy and still. Jess turned on the radio, but every station was static. When we finally saw lights ahead, my stomach unclenched. It was another gas station, except as we pulled in, I froze. It was the same one, same flickering canopy lights, same pump with the spinning numbers. Jess's voice was a whisper. "How?" The man was standing in the doorway again, waiting. This time I didn't get out. I threw the car in reverse, spun the wheel, and tore out of the lot. The road behind us twisted in ways I didn't remember, turns that shouldn't have been there. And every time we thought we'd found a different path, the glow of that flickering canopy appeared ahead again. The third time we arrived, Jess was pale and shaking. She looked at me with wide eyes. "Just do it, whatever he wants." "We can't." "Get out." The man stepped forward as I killed the engine. I got out, legs numb, and walked to him. His face was calm, but there was something hungry behind his eyes. He led me inside without a word. I don't remember what happened after that. I just remember stepping back into the night, starting the pump, and watching the numbers roll as the tank filled. Jess was staring at me when I got in the car. "What?" I asked. She shook her head. "Do you know my name?" I laughed. "Of course the word caught in my throat. Her face was familiar, but the name, nothing came. Not even a guess. I never got it back. And weeks later, when we drove past that stretch of US 90 in daylight, there was no gravel road, no station, no sign. Just scrub brush and a barbed wire fence running off into the desert. But sometimes, late at night, I dream of that place, and in the dreams, I'm trading something else. I never know what until I wake up and something in my life is missing. A photo I swear I owned. A scar on my arm gone without a trace. The memory of the house I grew up in. And every time, in that dream, the man is still behind the counter, smiling that same tight smile, waiting for me to run out of something I can't get back. It was some time after 2 in the morning when we pulled into Rest Area 23, northbound on I-35, just outside Temple, Texas. I was driving back from San Antonio with my girlfriend, Marissa, and her little brother, Caleb. We'd been at her cousin's wedding all day, then stayed for the after party, and by the time we hit the road, I was running on fumes, not from alcohol. I was the designated driver, but from exhaustion. I remember my eyes were burning from staring at the white lines in the dark, the rhythmic hum of the tires lulling me into that dangerous state where every passing green sign looks the same. The rest stop was a relief. It wasn't a big one, just the standard Texas Department of Transportation design, a squat concrete building with the men's and women's restrooms on either side, vending machines humming under yellow floodlights, a couple of picnic tables bolted to the cement under, a pavilion and a row of battered soda machines against the far wall. Beyond that was a dark patch of grass that dropped off into blackness, and somewhere down there, I knew, the highway frontage dissolved into thick woods and low, swampy areas that you could smell if the wind shifted. We parked under the glare of a tall sodium lamp, the kind that turns everything a sick orange. The only other vehicle there was a beat-up Ford Econoline van, white paint mottled with rust blooms, parked way over at the far end. Its side door was open a crack, no movement inside. I noticed it only because, in the near-deserted emptiness of the lot, it looked out of place, like it had been there too long. Marissa stirred from the back seat where she'd been half asleep next to Caleb. "Bathroom break?" she mumbled. "Yeah," I said. "Stretch your legs." "I'll grab a Coke from the machine." Inside, the air was stale and damp. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The tile floors were the institutional kind, faded beige with darker flecks. The grout lines darkened with age. The walls were the same ceramic tile, high enough to make the place feel like a bunker. It smelled faintly of bleach, but under that was a heavier odor, like standing water. The restrooms were set in a short hallway, a women's on the left, men's on the right, and in the middle, a door marked Family Restroom in bold black letters, a universal symbol for accessibility beneath it. That was when I first heard it, a faint sound, muffled by the thick door. Crying. It was soft, stuttering, the kind of sobbing a child does when they're trying not to be heard. I slowed down. "You hear that?" I asked Marissa. She frowned and tilted her head. "Yeah, sounds like a kid." We stood in front of the family restroom door. The sound was clearer now, a boy's voice, no older than maybe 7 or 8, caught between hiccuping sobs. I bent slightly and saw 2 sneaker-clad feet under the gap, small ones. Black Converse, the white toes scuffed. I knocked gently. "Hey, buddy, you okay in there?" The crying hitched but didn't stop. No words, just that low, breathy sobbing. Marissa stepped closer. "Where's your mom or dad? Are you hurt?" Still nothing. I tried the handle. Locked. I could see the faint green of the vacant occupied slider. It was red. The lock was engaged from the inside. "I'll get the custodian," I said. There was always someone on duty at these places, even this late. The building's far corner had a door marked Maintenance. I knocked, then again harder, and a minute later a heavy-set man in a reflective vest shuffled out, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Kid's locked in the family stall," I told him. "Been crying." "Won't answer." He frowned. "Ain't nobody in there. I cleaned it like 10 minutes ago." "Well, there is now," I said, sharper than I meant. 2 feet under the door. "He's been crying since we walked in." The custodian dug into his pocket, producing a jangling ring of keys. He followed us back down the hall, muttering something about how people dump their kids here. While they used the vending machines, the sobbing was still there when we got close. I swear it hadn't stopped once, not even when the custodian knocked, and said, "Maintenance gonna open up, all right?" He slid the master key into the lock. There was a sharp click. The handle turned, the door swung inward, the light was on. The air inside was damp and cold, smelling faintly of mold. The tile floor was wet, as though someone had just mopped, water still dripping from the underside of the baby-changing station onto the floor. But the room was empty. The stall was maybe 8 by 8 feet. There was nowhere for anyone to hide. The corners were bare. The single trash bin was empty, liner hanging slack. The sink was dry, and yet the sound of crying had stopped. Only at the instant the door had opened, cut off mid-breath like a switch thrown. Marissa was pale. Where'd he go?" The custodian scratched his head. "Told you, ain't nobody here. Some of these pipes make weird noises when the wind's right." I crouched down, staring at the floor. The water was clear but pooled unevenly, as though small feet had disturbed it recently. The tile still held faint outlines in the puddle shoe shapes pointing toward the wall. Small, converse-sized. They stopped a foot from the cinder block, like whoever had been wearing them just stood there. I looked under the changing table. Nothing. The custodian gave us a gruff, "Y'all have a good night," and pulled the door shut behind him. He locked it again and wandered off toward his closet. We left the restroom in a hurry. I told myself it was weird, but nothing more than an echo or trick of sound. Marissa didn't say much, but she kept glancing over her shoulder as we crossed. The the van at the far end still sat there. This time, the side door was wide open, the dark interior yawning toward us. I thought I saw something pale shift inside, but it might have been my eyes adjusting from the harsh indoor light. We got in the car and I locked the doors. Caleb stirred awake in the back seat. "Who was crying?" he asked drowsily. "What?" Marissa said. "I heard crying," he mumbled. "But it was in our car." I started the engine, suddenly eager to get back on the road. As I pulled out, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The family restroom door was still locked, the custodian's car parked beside it. But for just a moment, under the sodium lamp glow, I saw 2 wet shoe prints leading away from that door, across the concrete, vanishing halfway to the dark grass dot. We didn't stop again until we were halfway to Dallas. That night, after we dropped Caleb off and got home, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the sound of those sobs, the way they stopped dead as the key turned. I thought about the water pooling under the changing table and how the drip had been steady, like from a faucet that had been left on. Only there was no faucet above it. A few days later, I Googled Rest Area 23 northbound I-35 child crying. Buried deep in the results was a forum post from 2011. A trucker describing pulling in around 3 a.m. and hearing a child crying in the family restroom. Same details: locked door, shoes visible, no one inside when it was opened. He mentioned the dripping too. Said the custodian told him a boy had drowned in the drainage ditch behind the rest stop in '94. Wandered away from his parents during a picnic. The ditch had flooded that night after a storm. They didn't find him until morning. I closed the laptop. It's been months now, but sometimes, when I pull into any rest stop at night, I find myself glancing at the family restroom, waiting to hear the sound of small sneakers scuffing the tile, the muffled hiccup of a boy's sobs. I know if I do, I won't knock. And I won't look under the door, because if I see those black Converse again, I'm afraid they'll turn toward me this time, and I'll have to find out if there's still water dripping. I grew up in Claiborne, Texas. But my dad's family had a small ranch outside Glen Rose. It was more of a rundown property than an actual working ranch. Just a few acres of mesquite and cedar scrub, the remnants of an old barn, and a mobile home that had been there since the 70s. My uncle lived there full-time, raising goats and fixing tractors for cash. I used to visit a couple times a month, but after he died in 2015, nobody really had much reason to go. Until last August. My cousin Jared called me out of the blue and asked if I could drive out to the property with him. He said he wanted to check the place before putting it on the market. I had a free Saturday and thought it'd be a good chance to reconnect. Besides, a drive through Glen Rose country past the dinosaur park, the lazy bend of the Paluxy River, was always a sight worth seeing. We met at a Sonic in Claiborne late in the afternoon. Jared showed up in his beat-up Silverado, and I followed. In my Honda CR-V, I remember thinking it was too hot to be doing much of anything. The air was heavy, shimmering in the heat, the kind of Texas August where asphalt feels like it might just liquefy under your tires. We took the back way, FM 1434, which winds past ranches, open fields, and the occasional bait shop. The road is narrow, with no shoulder in some spots, and the cell reception drops to nothing. It's beautiful, but in a lonely way, like the land is holding on to something. You're not supposed to disturb. We got to the property around 6:30. The sun was starting its slow drop, painting the cedar trees gold. Jared walked me through the mobile home, pointing out water damage and busted flooring, and we spent about an hour poking around. The goats were gone, and the barn was mostly collapsed. I told him he'd probably have to sell it cheap. He just shrugged and said, "I just want it gone." By the time we left, the sun was gone and the crickets had started up in force. That's when we saw it for the first time. We just turned back onto 1434, when a pair of headlights flicked on in my rear view. At first, I thought it was just another pickup, but when I glanced again, I saw there were no headlights. Just the faint silhouette of a vehicle pacing us, maybe 30 yards back. It was a dark green van, boxy, the kind you'd expect to see hauling tools or maybe church kids. The paint was dull, almost matte, and the windshield looked blacked out. I figured it was some local without their lights on. I tapped my brake lights to get their attention. Nothing. The van stayed exactly the same distance back. Got Jared on the phone, barely had a bar, and asked if he saw it. He said, "Yeah, they've been behind you since we left." Don't like that. About a mile later, the van suddenly surged forward, no warning, no change in engine noise. It passed me in a blur so fast it rattled my mirrors, but the thing that hit me hardest was the temperature. As it came alongside, the air inside my Honda went cold, like someone had just opened the meat locker. My breath fogged on the inside of the glass. In Texas, in August. And then it was gone. It didn't just pass Jared ahead of me, it vanished. 1 second it was tailgating him, the next there was nothing but empty road stretching ahead in the dark. Was still processing when I noticed something swinging in front of me. A thin pink cord tangled around my driver's side wiper. At the end of it was a child's bracelet plastic bead spelling out the name Maddie. I knew instantly it hadn't been there before. My wipers were clear when we left the property. We pulled over at a cattle guard, both of us shaken. Jared took the bracelet off the wiper, and I swear to God, it felt cold. Not just cold enough that frost clung to the beads. We didn't talk much after that. Just drove the rest of the way into Claiborne in silence. I couldn't sleep that night. Around 2 a.m, I got a text from Jared. Check this out. It was a screenshot from some old Somerville County news archive. A green Dodge tradesman van, plate number long since decommissioned, had been linked to a series of child abductions between 1987 and 1991. The man they thought owned it had disappeared. After the last reported case, a 7-year-old named Madison Brewer who vanished walking home from the Glen Rose School. They never found her. They never found the van either. I asked Jared where he'd found the article, but he didn't answer. The next morning, I went out to my car to head to work. The August heat had returned full force, the kind that hits you like opening an oven door, but my windshield was frosted over, and sitting dead center on the glass was the bracelet. Same pink cord, same plastic beads. Only now, the letters were different. They spelled my name. The first time I saw the Devil's River was in late August, and it was the kind of Texas summer day where the heat doesn't just sit on your shoulders, it pushes, heavy and deliberate, like it wants you to break. My girlfriend at the time, Melanie, had convinced me to take a 2-day trip out there. She'd seen a blog post about hidden gems of Texas and how the Devil's River was supposedly one of the clearest, purest bodies of water in the state. The pictures showed turquoise stretches of calm water framed by white limestone bluffs and mesquite trees, so far removed from the mud-colored creeks we grew up around. We'd been driving since early morning, heading west out of Del Rio on a 2-lane highway that seemed to stretch forever into scrubland. Cell reception had died about 20 miles back, and the only signs of life were the occasional rusted-out windmill and the buzzards wheeling over the roadkill. It was around 2 p.m. when Melanie spotted it, a faded brown sign with white lettering. That read, Devil's River State Natural Area, 3 miles. An arrow pointed down a narrow caliche road. The turnoff was rough, tire-jarring, and lined with prickly pear cactus that leaned into the road like they were reaching for us. We'd planned to hike a bit, take some pictures, maybe eat the sandwiches we'd packed, and head back before sunset. I'm not a superstitious guy, but the moment we left the pavement, the air felt different, heavier, quieter. The cicadas still screamed, but their rhythm seemed off, uneven, like they were reacting to something unseen. We reached the small dirt lot for day visitors. There were no other cars, no ranger station, no sound except the low hiss of the wind moving through the dry grass. Off to the side, maybe 20 feet from the start of a trail, sat a single picnic table under the sparse shade of a live oak. It looked older than the park itself, wood bleached gray and splintered, bolts rusted to the color of dried blood. The surface was warped, and something about it felt wrong. I noticed it before Melanie did. At the base of the table, ants were moving in a perfect ring around the perimeter, thousands of them, all in a synchronized loop like they were following a path only they could see. They didn't break formation. They didn't wander. It was an unbroken circle, tight and deliberate, like they were keeping something in or out. That's creepy, Melanie said, crouching down to get a closer look. She pulled out her phone like she was going to record, then frowned when she remembered we had no service. They're not even touching the table legs. It's like they're guarding it. I laughed, but it sounded forced. Guarding a picnic table. Yeah, that's logical. We sat anyway, spreading our sandwiches and a couple of bottles of water across the warped surface. The moment I put my elbows down, I noticed the wood felt damp. Not just cool from the shade, but actually wet. I checked my sleeves and hands, thinking maybe I'd spilled something from the cooler, but they were dry. The dampness seemed to come from inside the wood, like it was sweating in the heat. Halfway through my sandwich, Melanie went quiet, staring past me toward the trail. Her expression tightened. What? I asked. I thought I saw someone, just for a second. By that bend? She pointed toward where the trail disappeared behind a stand of cedar. They were wearing boots, muddy boots. I turned to look, but there was nothing. Just pale dust and the harsh shimmer of heat waves. Probably a hiker, I said, though I didn't believe it. There hadn't been another car in the lot, and the dry ground showed no fresh tracks except ours. Melanie Didn't touch her sandwich after that. She kept glancing toward the trail like she expected someone to come around the corner. The air felt even heavier now, and the cicada's uneven rhythm was making my head feel tight, like it was stuffed with static. We decided to pack up after barely 5 minutes at the table. As I stood, I noticed something new. The ants had stopped moving. They were frozen in place, each one angled outward, as if they'd all turned to face us. Neither of us said anything as we walked back to the car. I started the engine and cranked the AC, trying to shake the weird unease that had crept under my skin. We didn't talk much for the first few miles, just stared out at the endless scrubland. It wasn't until we hit the highway again that Melanie twisted around in her seat and froze. "What the hell?" she whispered. I glanced in the rearview mirror. On the back seat, faint but unmistakable in the dust that had settled on the upholstery, were muddy boot prints. Not just dirt smears, full, detailed impressions, as if someone had stood there. The tread pattern was sharp, fresh, with little flecks of dark river mud crumbling onto the seat. We hadn't been near the water. We hadn't seen another soul. I pulled over onto the shoulder, heart pounding. I checked the doors locked, just like they'd been the whole time. I opened the back door and stared. The prints were angled toward the center like whoever made them had been facing forward, watching us. Melanie climbed out too, looking pale. "We were only at that table for 5 minutes," she said quietly, almost to herself. 5 minutes, and they got in the car. I wanted to tell her it was impossible, that maybe it was some old stain we'd never noticed. But when I touched one of the prints, my fingers came away wet. We didn't go back to the Devil's River. Not that day, not ever. But sometimes, in the middle of the night, I'll hear the faint crunch of boots in the gravel driveway outside my window. And once, after a summer thunderstorm, I found that same perfect ring of ants in my backyard circling nothing, guarding something I couldn't see. The next morning there were fresh muddy boot prints on my porch, facing my door. I was headed west on I-10 late one August evening, somewhere between Kerrville and Sonora, the kind of stretch where the sky swallows the horizon and the only light comes from the CO, occasional 18-wheeler and your own headlights. I had been driving since San Antonio, planning to make it to Fort Stockton before calling it a night, but I was already feeling the dry burn in my eyes and the ache in my back from sitting too long. The sun had set an hour ago, and the asphalt still radiated the day's heat. You could see it shimmering faintly in the beams of my high beams. Like the road itself was breathing. It was mile marker 712 when I saw her, a lone figure standing on the shoulder, illuminated just enough for my headlights to catch her shape. She was in a faded denim jacket over a pale dress, her hair dark and loose, catching the wind from passing traffic. She wasn't holding her thumb out like a normal hitchhiker, just standing there with both hands wrapped around a bright red cooler, the cheap plastic kind you take to a picnic. At first, I wasn't going to stop. Every Texas rest stop safety flyer tells you not to pick up strangers at night, especially women traveling alone, because half the time they aren't alone. But there was something about the way she looked that made me slow down. Not desperation, exactly, but urgency. She didn't even step toward the road when I eased onto the shoulder. She just watched me brake, her face unreadable. I rolled down the passenger side window, keeping my voice even. "You headed somewhere?" She leaned in slightly, her features coming into the light. She was young, maybe late 20s, but her eyes had that tired, faraway focus you see in people who've been awake too long. "Junction," she said simply. "I can give you gas money." I glanced at the empty stretch ahead. Junction was about 45 miles. Not far, and it was on my way. All right. "Hop in." She opened the door without a word, the cooler balanced carefully in her arms like it was full of something fragile. She didn't set it in the back seat. Didn't even put it on the floor, just kept it against her lap, both arms locked around it. When the door shut, I caught the faintest sound, a low vibration. Not like ice sloshing around, but humming. I pulled back onto the interstate, trying not to stare at it. "You got a name?" I asked after a minute. "Marla." I told her mine, but she didn't respond, eyes fixed on the road ahead like she was counting the reflectors in the median. The cab of my truck felt too quiet except for the constant rush of air through the vents. Every so often, she'd adjust her grip on the cooler, her knuckles pale, her fingers twitching like she was worried it might shift too much. It was maybe 20 miles before I noticed two things at once. First, the cooler wasn't cold. In fact, the side pressed against her knees looked like it was fogging the fabric of her dress, not from cold, but from heat. Second, the humming was steady, mechanical, like a motor running under strain. I told myself it could be anything, some sort of portable medical thing. Maybe an oxygen compressor. Maybe she had a sick pet inside, though the thought made my skin crawl for reasons I couldn't place. We passed through a patch where cell reception dropped to nothing. The radio crackled with static, and the truck's headlights dimmed a fraction. She didn't react, but the humming deepened, a tone I could feel in my teeth. "You okay there?" I asked finally. Her eyes flicked to me for the first time. "We're almost there." It wasn't the answer to my question, but the way she said it, like she knew exactly where we'd end up, made something in my gut tighten. We hit the outskirts of Junction just after 10 p.m. The streets were quiet, a couple of convenience stores lit like islands in the dark. I slowed at the first stoplight, right against the empty intersection. The moment the truck came to a full stop, I felt the air change. Not cooler, not warmer, just heavier. And then I realized she wasn't in the seat anymore. The passenger door was shut. The seat belt hung loose. No slam, no movement, she was simply gone. But the cooler remained. It sat on the seat where she'd been, red plastic gleaming under the dash lights, a faint mist rising from where it touched the upholstery. The humming was louder now, rhythmic, like a pulse. I reached over without thinking, and the instant my fingers brushed it, I jerked back. It wasn't just warm, it was fever hot, like touching the hood of a car that's been baking in the sun all day. And underneath that heat was something else, a faint, irregular movement. The light turned green, and I drove without deciding to, turning off the main drag toward the edge of town. I told myself I'd leave it somewhere, maybe on the steps of the police station, maybe in a dumpster. Anything to get it out of my truck. But my hands didn't leave the wheel, and my foot didn't slow at the turns. I was heading down streets I didn't know, deeper into Junction's quiet neighborhoods. By the time I stopped, I was in front of a house I'd never seen before. Old, paint peeling, front porch sagging under the weight of years. Every light in the place was on, bright and yellow, spilling out into the yard. I don't know why I carried the cooler up the porch steps. I don't remember deciding to. I just remember the way it seemed lighter in my hands than it had any right to be, and how the humming seemed to align with my heartbeat. The closer I got to the door, I knocked. Once, twice. The door swung inward, without anyone touching it. The air that poured out smelled like hot metal and something faintly sweet, like fruit left too long in the sun. Inside, the hallway stretched farther than the dimensions of the house should have allowed. And at the far end, in the golden light, was Marla. She was smiling now, not warmly, just expectantly. "Bring it here," she said. I should have turned and run, but my legs carried me down that impossible hallway, the cooler warm against my palms. She took it from me like it was a child she'd been waiting for. Unlatched the lid. I caught a glimpse, just a glimpse, before she closed it again. A mass of flesh, slick and pink, pulsing as if breathing. An eye, human but too large, rolled toward me. The humming wasn't mechanical at all. It was a sound. "It made. You brought it home," she said softly, like she was telling me I'd done something good. The hallway behind me was gone. The door was gone. The cooler pulsed once in her hands, and then the hum filled my head until there was nothing else. That's the last thing I remember before waking up in my truck, parked on the shoulder at mile marker 712, dawn breaking over the hills. The seat beside me was empty, but the smell of hot metal lingered. And in the rearview mirror, for just a second, I saw a red cooler in the bed of the truck. The lid was moving. If you've ever driven Highway 6 in the dead heat of August, you know it feels like the whole road is sweating. I was coming back from Clifton, windows cracked because my AC's been dead for months, when I hit that overpass north of Riesel. I've crossed it 100 times. It's nothing, just two concrete supports and a stretch of county road overhead. There was a silver Camry ahead of me, a white Tahoe behind. The Camry's shadow slid under the overpass like normal. Mine didn't dot it, didn't shorten or vanish. It split away walking alongside my truck. Not the shape of the F-150, but a man. Tall, thin, arms swinging in step with my speed. I stared so hard at it I nearly drifted. Then it tapped my driver's window. Twice. Light, like someone politely asking to be let in. I floored it. 70. 75. The thing kept pace, step for step, tapping every 5 seconds. 10 miles later, it stopped. I pulled into a gas station and sat in the cab until my hands stopped shaking. I didn't tell anyone until a week later. When I drove that way again, I made myself watch the shadows of oncoming cars. All normal except for a red Honda Civic. The same walking shadow trailed it into the distance. 3 months later, that Civic crossed the median into a semi. No alcohol, no drugs. The driver, Shannon, died instantly. I avoided the overpass for months. But then one night, parked in my driveway, I heard it again tap tap on my kitchen window. No one outside. A week later, it came while I was in bed. From the headboard. Tap tap dot. It started happening more often. Sometimes in the truck. Sometimes in the house. Always that slow, patient rhythm. I put a dash cam in my truck, hoping to catch it. The next time I drove under the bridge, the footage showed no truck at all, just the road, the overpass, and the shadow man walking beside where I should have been. His head turned toward the camera once before vanishing. Then Shannon's sister found Polaroids in her car. All were road shots, but one showed the overpass. The walking shadow was there, clear as day. Another was a close-up of a handprint on glass, my face faintly reflected in it, taken the day before her crash. Now I'm hearing it nightly. Sometimes from the wall, sometimes from the inside of the window. And last night, when I finally looked, the reflection staring back wasn't just mine, it was me, standing outside, waiting. If you ever pass that overpass in McLennan County and your shadow doesn't follow you under, keep driving. Don't look, don't stop. Once it walks beside you, it's only a matter of time before it wants inside. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi, 5 tap tap. I was driving south on SH 130, the toll road that skirts east of Austin, late on a Sunday night in early October. The air outside had that brittle, dry feeling Texas gets before a cold front moves in, where the wind smells like cedar and dust, and every sound carries farther than it should. My wife, Jenna, was half dozing in the passenger seat, a takeout cup from a Whataburger in her hands, the straw bent at a strange angle. The dashboard clock read 10:47 p.m., and the world outside was a strip of asphalt framed by yellow lines and black nothingness. We'd spent the weekend visiting friends in Pflugerville and we were headed home to Seguin. SH to 130 is supposed to be the fast way, 85 miles per hour, fewer speed traps, fewer headlights. But if you've ever driven it at night, you know it has a different kind of loneliness than most highways. It's not the casual emptiness of a county road or the predictable hum of I-35. It's more like a tunnel of darkness where your own headlights feel swallowed up, and you start thinking about all the stretches of land you're passing that have number houses, no lights, and maybe no reason to exist. Jenna was drifting in and out, the radio low when I saw the faint glow in the rearview mirror, red and blue lights, way back, bouncing across the median like a slow heartbeat. I frowned. I wasn't speeding. Cruise control was set dead on at 85. Still, the lights grew closer. Within a minute, they were right behind me, and the patrol car's spotlight flicked on, cutting through the back window and painting the inside of the car in harsh white. "Why is he pulling us over?" Jenna murmured, blinking awake. "I have no idea," I said, signaling and pulling onto the shoulder. The gravel on the side of the road was coarse and uneven, crunching under the tires. I rolled the window down and watched in the mirror as the trooper climbed out. He moved slow, like his joints didn't work quite right, his boots dragging slightly with each step. The brim of his hat was low over his eyes, shadowing most of his face, but his mouth was visible, thin, colorless lips that didn't seem to close all the way, even when he wasn't speaking. When he got to the window, the flashlight beam hit me square in the eyes. "Evenin'," he said. His voice was like gravel poured over concrete, dry and broken in places. "License and registration." I fumbled for my wallet, handed him the documents, and tried to keep my voice steady. "Was I speeding, officer?" He didn't answer right away. He shone the flashlight into the back seat, scanning it like he was looking for something specific. Jenna shifted uncomfortably. Then he finally said, "You crossed the center line back there." I knew I hadn't. There hadn't even been another car in sight for 20 minutes. But I nodded, figuring it was easier not to argue. He stood there, holding my license loosely between two fingers, staring at it for what felt like too long. "Step out of the vehicle," he said. Jenna gave me a look that said, "What the hell?" But I did as he asked. The wind outside was cold, sharper than I'd expected. He led me to the back of the car, the patrol car's lights spinning silently behind him. That was when I noticed something strange. There was no sound from his radio. No chatter, no static, nothing. Just the low hum of the engines and the distant sound of wind sweeping across the empty fields. "Where you headed tonight?" he asked, still staring at my license. "Seguin," I said. "We were in Pflugerville for the weekend." His head tilted slightly, as if I'd said something unexpected. "Seguin," he repeated, almost tasting the word. Then he reached into his jacket, pulled out a worn, brown citation book, and started writing. His pen scratched the paper in slow, deliberate strokes. When he tore the page out and handed it to me, I saw the date printed at the top, October 14th, 2020, 3 years ago. Beneath, the date was my old address, the one from the apartment Jenna and I had moved out of 2 years back. The rest of the ticket was filled in with neat, blocky handwriting. The violation read, "Failure to yield to official signal." The signature at the bottom was just initials, JD. I looked up, my mouth dry. "This isn't. I mean, today's date is—" "Keep it for your records," he interrupted, pressing it into my hand harder than necessary. "You'll need it." Then he turned, walked back to his cruiser, and drove off without another word. No request for a signature, no explanation, no lights when he pulled away. Just gone into the dark, like he'd been swallowed up. I got back in the car, my pulse in my ears. Jenna was wide awake now. What was that about? I showed her the ticket. Her eyes scanned it, Then she looked at me sharply. This is from when we still lived at the Springs Apartments. Why would he have that? And why would he write a date from back then? I don't know, I said. I shoved it into the glove compartment and tried to put the car in gear. For some reason, the engine hesitated before starting, like the battery had drained a little. The rest of the drive home was silent except for the tires on the pavement. Every time we passed an overpass or road sign, I caught myself checking the mirrors, half expecting to see those lights again. But the road stayed empty. It wasn't until the next morning that I pulled the ticket back out. I wanted to show a friend at work mostly as a weird story. But when I unfolded it, I noticed something I hadn't before. Beneath the violation, in the same blocky handwriting, was a line I was sure hadn't been there before. Second warning. Last chance. My hands went cold. I showed it to Jenna, but she swore up and down it had been there all along. I was sure she was wrong. I remember staring at that slip under the spinning lights, reading every word, and there hadn't been anything. Like that. That night, I searched Texas State Trooper JD, along with the stretch of SH-130 where we'd been pulled over. After an hour of nothing useful, I found a newspaper archive from 2020. Buried halfway down the page was a short article about a trooper named James Doherty, initial JD. He'd died in a crash while pursuing a drunk driver on SH-130. The date of his death? October 14, 2020. I didn't sleep much after that. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept seeing the way his mouth hadn't quite closed when he spoke, the colorless lips and the dry, breaking voice. Like he was speaking from somewhere that wasn't meant for talking. It's been 2 weeks since then, and nothing else has happened. But 2 nights ago, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was another citation, same handwriting, same date, but the violation was different. Failure to stop. Final notice, and the address. On it, it wasn't our old apartment. It was where we live now. We were driving west toward Sonora late one August night, the kind of heat-heavy night where the blacktop still shimmers faintly under the moon, holding on to the day's warmth like a fever patient. The air outside was thick, humid in a way that didn't belong in West Texas, and the smell was wrong too. Normally, nights out there smelled like dust and sage, maybe mesquite if you were lucky. That night, the air carried something sour, like meat gone bad under a hot sun. It was just me and my friend Travis in my old Silverado, coming back from a job in Del Rio. We were both running on gas station coffee and those little cellophane-wrapped pecan pies, talking less and less the further we drove. The 2-lane stretch past the I-10 interchange was dead, quiet except for the hum of the tires and the occasional gust of wind across the plains. That's when we saw its headlights reflecting off something big and white across the road. At first, I thought it was a regular accident. From a distance, it looked like a semi had jackknifed across both lanes. Its trailer was angled diagonally, blocking the highway, hazard reflectors catching our beams. We slowed down, expecting to see a mangled cab on one end, maybe a driver, walking around in shock. But when we rolled closer, my foot stayed pressed to the brake. There was no cab. It wasn't like it had broken off or burned away. There was just nothing. The trailer ended abruptly in midair, its coupling torn and ragged, as if something had bitten it off. The metal edges were curled outward, warped in a strange way, and the spot where the cab should have been was dark and yawning. Travis squinted through the windshield. "Where's the rest of it?" I pulled onto the shoulder, hazard lights clicking. "Probably rolled off the road," I said, though there was no sign of tire tracks in the dirt. My high beams washed over the trailer's side. The paint was scuffed and dirty, but something about the surface made me uneasy. It wasn't flat like normal. It looked like the metal itself was flexing. At first, I thought it was heat waves. Then I realized it was moving. It was subtle, a slow bowing outward, then inward, like the metal skin of the trailer was breathing. We both stared at it, silent. I could hear my own pulse in my ears, and somewhere under the ticking of the hazards, a faint sound came from the trailer. Not the creak of cooling metal, something wet, sticky. A sound that didn't belong in the open desert. Travis shifted in his seat. Man, that thing's moving. Before I could answer, the breathing or whatever it was sped up slightly, and a shadow passed along the inside wall. It was too big to be a person. The shape bent strangely at the joints, the head, or what I think was the head, pressing against the aluminum from inside, making the thin metal bulge before retreating. A gaina shiver went up my spine. You see that? Yeah, Travis said. I don't think we should be here. Still, something in me, stupid curiosity or maybe just disbelief, made me step out of the truck. The air was thicker outside, that rotten smell stronger now, tinged with something metallic. Gravel crunched under my boots as I edged closer. The highway was silent except for the faint whine of the wind and a low, rhythmic thump from inside the trailer, like a heartbeat echoing through steel. When I was about 10 feet away, I saw the condensation. Each time the side bowed out, a faint sheen of moisture spread across it, glistening under my headlights before drying as it drew back in. I realized my hands were shaking. I called out without thinking. Hello? Anybody in there? The breathing stopped instantly. The trailer went still, dead still. No wind, no sound. The hair on my arms prickled so hard it hurt. Then, from somewhere deep inside, came a sound I will never forget. Not a voice. Not even words. It was a low moan, guttural, but layered like 2 or 3 voices speaking at once, tangled and wet, rising up into a pitch that scraped my nerves raw. Behind me, Travis yelled, "Get back in the truck, man. Let's go." I took a step backward, my boots crunching loud in the silence. The trailer shifted, its metal groaning, and something struck the inside wall with enough force to dent it outward. A single, sharp blow that made the whole thing shudder, that broke whatever spell had been holding me there. I ran back to the Silverado, yanked the door shut, and threw it in reverse. We backed up onto the other lane and went around it, hugging the far shoulder. As we passed the open coupling where the cab should have been, my headlights lit the inside. For a split second. I wish they hadn't. It was not empty. Something pale and glistening was pressed against the far wall, hunched and folded in on itself, arms, or what I thought were arms, curled tight. Its skin was stretched too thin, almost translucent, and its chest, or whatever part of it was facing me, rose and fell like a bellows. As our light swept over it, the head lifted. 2 lidless eyes caught the beam, reflecting red. I floored. We didn't speak for miles, just stared straight ahead. Eventually, the highway spat us out toward Sonora, and the normal world seemed to slide back into place, the fluorescent glow of a gas station, the distant thrum of a semi heading the other way, a faint trace of country music through my radio. But even in that safe, ordinary light, my stomach wouldn't unclench. When we finally pulled over for gas, Travis lit a cigarette with trembling hands. "You saw it, right?" he said. I nodded. He didn't ask what I thought it was. Neither of. U.S. wanted to name it. A week later, I checked the DPS reports for accidents along that stretch. There was nothing. No jackknife trailer. No cleanup. No record of a wreck at all. But last night, I was heading home from Sonora again, and as I passed a dark stretch of highway, I saw hazard reflectors flicker in my lights. A white trailer lay across the lanes, no cab in sight, its metal skin bowing. In and out in a slow, patient rhythm, and this time it was facing my direction. I've driven the stretch of I-45 between Corsicana and Fairfield more times than I care to count. Most nights it's just a black ribbon unspooling under the tires, dotted with the occasional truck stop glow or lonely porch light far off in the fields. But there's a point southbound just past Richland where the land gets emptier. Fewer lights, fewer exits. Navarro County at night feels like a place the world forgot to finish. That's where exit 213 sits, if you can call it an exit. It's a faded green sign with missing bolts, pointing to service road and motel in white letters so chipped they look like they've been eaten away by acid rain. I'd never taken it before. That night, though, I didn't have much choice. It was late August, thick heat even after sundown, the kind that glues your shirt to your back and makes the steering wheel feel tacky under your hands. I'd been driving since Waco, pushing through that trance you get after too many hours on the road. Somewhere past midnight, the fatigue hit so hard my vision tunneled. I nearly missed a curve when my head nodded for half a second. That's when I saw the sign for the motel. The gas light had been on for 20 miles. The next town wasn't for another 40. And the thought of pulling over to sleep in the car by the roadside felt worse than gambling on some forgotten exit. So I took it. The access road curved away from the highway and instantly felt wrong. No streetlights, just the high beams catching brittle grass and rust-colored dirt. The black outline of barbed wire fences stretched away into nothing, with the occasional thin-limbed mesquite twisting up against the stars. A few hundred yards in, the gravel popped under my tires and the motel came into view. It wasn't one of those cozy mom-and-pop places. It was the kind of roadside motel you see in crime scene photos. Long single-story building, all doors. Facing the lot, faded mustard paint peeling to gray underneath. The vacancy sign buzzed weakly in red, a couple letters dark. Something about the air here felt heavier, like the humidity had doubled in the last mile. Inside the office, the hum of a window AC fought against the smell of old coffee and something sourer, like damp carpet left in the sun. The clerk was a man in his 60s with deep creases in his face, a checkered shirt gone thin at the elbows, and that watery, distant look you sometimes see in people who live too close to empty places. He didn't ask where I was coming from, or where I was headed. Just need a room for the night, I told him, setting my license and a credit card on the counter. He glanced at the card, then at me. Last one. His voice was gravelly and quiet, as if it hadn't been used much lately. I signed the register, noticed that every date on the page above mine was weeks old, and every guest name looked the same handwriting, same pen. The thought made my stomach tighten. The key was an actual metal key, attached to a chunk of green plastic stamped with the number 6. Breakfast? I asked, more to fill the silence than because I wanted it. He looked at me for a long moment. Don't worry about that. Just rest. Checkout's at 10. His eyes flicked up toward the ceiling when he said it, like there was something above us listening. Room 6 was near the far end, one door from the last. The air outside felt hotter than it had when I got out of my car, like the heat was bleeding up from the ground itself. I slid the key in, turned it, and the door swung open on stiff hinges. The first thing I noticed was that the bedspread was wrinkled, not just slept-in wrinkled, but still warm wrinkled, like someone had gotten up just before I opened the door. A faint smell of perfume hung in the air, sweet and heavy, clinging to the damp heat in the room. The bathroom light was already on. Steam clung to the mirror, and through the fog I could see words written in the condensation. Don't check out. The letters dripped slowly, like the mirror was still sweating. I stood there for a long moment, the hair prickling on my arms despite the heat. My first thought was that some other guest had been in here minutes ago, maybe housekeeping, maybe a prankster. But the parking lot had been empty except for my car and a battered Ford pickup at the far end. I wiped the words away with a towel. The steam felt oddly cool on my fingers, like the air in that bathroom was a different temperature than the rest of the room. I should have gone back to the office. Should have gotten back in my car and taken my chances on the side of the road. But exhaustion makes you stupid. I told myself it was nothing a weird coincidence, maybe some leftover writing from whoever stayed here last and collapsed onto the bed. The sheets felt damp against my back. Not sweat damp, not from the humidity. It was more like they'd just been pulled from a cold washer and barely dried. Somewhere after 1 in the morning, I woke to a noise. Not the hum of the AC or the distant hiss of a truck on the highway. This was inside the room. A soft, dragging sound. I opened my eyes to darkness thicker than it had been before, the air even hotter. My heart thumped in my ears as I turned. My head toward the sound dot in the dim red spill from the vacancy sign outside. I could see the bathroom door was ajar now. Something moved in there. A shape, just at the edge of the light, shifting its weight in slow, deliberate motions like it was trying not to make a sound. I sat up, throat dry. Who's there? No answer. Just that dragging, like bare feet. Over tile. I reached for my phone on the nightstand. The screen stayed black when I tapped it. Dead battery, though it had been nearly full when I lay down. When I looked back at the bathroom, the shape was gone. I got up slowly, feet sinking into carpet that felt warmer than it should, almost pulsing with heat. The smell of perfume was stronger now, sweet to the point of being rancid. I pushed the bathroom door open with one finger. The light was off. No steam, no writing on the mirror this time. Just my reflection, pale and wide-eyed. I started to back out, but my reflection didn't move. It smiled instead. My legs gave out, and I caught myself on the doorframe. In that split second, the reflection leaned closer until its lips brushed the glass. A sound came out, not a voice exactly, but a long wet exhale that fogged the mirror. And in that fog, the words bloomed again. Don't check out. I stumbled backward into the bed, eyes locked on that mirror. The reflection was still smiling. And then, as my knees hit the mattress, the bathroom door swung shut by itself. I don't remember falling asleep. I don't even remember closing my eyes. When I woke, sunlight was bleeding through the blinds, but the room was still sweltering. The sheets were bone dry now, the perfume gone. My phone was on the nightstand, battery at 78%, like nothing had drained it. I thought about leaving right then. No shower, no checkout. Just bolt. But something in me, some stupid human need to act normal, made me grab my bag and head for the office. The clerk was there. Same spot, same distant stare. Sleep all right? He asked, like he didn't care about the answer. I set the key. Down. There was someone in my room last night. He didn't blink. That so? I nodded. In the bathroom, they wrote something on the mirror. What did it say? I hesitated. Saying it out loud felt wrong, like it would make it real again, but I told him. His lips pressed into a thin line, and he gave a single nod. Like he'd expected that answer. Some advice, he said quietly. If you're smart, you'll remember it. I turned to go, but he called after me. By the way, he said, eyes still fixed on the counter, you didn't book the last room last night. I stopped. What do you mean? That room's been occupied since 1979. My stomach dropped. Back at my car, I glanced at the building one last time. The blinds in room 6 were open now, and behind the glass, in the dimness, I saw my reflection in the mirror again, only I was still inside, smiling. The first time I drove through the Texas Hill Country with Jessica, I told her it was the kind of place that hides secrets. You can feel it in the air, how the wind seems to whisper through the cedar trees just loud enough for you to think you heard something. The limestone cliffs catch the last orange light of the day in a way that makes everything glow, like the land is holding its breath before night falls. We'd been dating about 4 months, and this was supposed to be our first real trip together. She was from Houston and thought the hill country was just wineries and bluebonnets. I told her it was a lot more than that. There are stretches of ranch land out here where you could vanish and no one would even know what county to search in. She laughed, called me morbid, but I caught her looking out the window a little longer than usual. After that, we left Austin in the late afternoon, heading west on 290 before cutting south toward some of the smaller, less touristy roads. I wasn't in a rush. This wasn't about getting somewhere. I wanted to show her the kind of Texas I grew up with, narrow highways that twist between steep hills, where the only light after sundown comes from your own headlights and the occasional porch bulb glowing faintly in the distance. Around 7:30, we came around a curve and saw a rusted brown sign for a scenic lookout about a quarter-mile ahead. I'd never noticed it before, but maybe that was because the road had been repaved recently and the trees cut back. The sign looked older than the highway white letters flaking off, bullet holes punched through the metal. "Let's stop," Jessica said, sitting up in her seat. "I want to see the sunset." We turned onto the gravel road that led uphill, passing through a wide iron gate. It was open, swinging slightly in the breeze. On each side of it, a high cattle fence ran into the tree line. The gravel was loose and pale, crunching under the tires. About 100 yards up, the road widened into a flat, elevated clearing. There was no official scenic structure, just a low limestone wall at the edge of a cliff about waist-high. Beyond it, the hill country sprawled out in rolling green, and gold hills fading into purple distance. It was beautiful, I won't deny that. The sun was a half-melted coin on the horizon, bleeding pink light into the clouds. You could see the shimmer of a river far below and the tiny silver glint of a water tower in some small town miles away. Jessica got out with her phone to take pictures while I leaned against the hood of the car. The breeze smelled faintly of cedar and something else, something dry and metallic, like blood on a coin. "You okay?" she asked after a minute. "Yeah," I said, though I kept looking toward the tree line behind us. It felt too still. The kind of stillness that isn't natural in Texas, where even at dusk you hear crickets, birds settling, distant dogs barking. Up here there was nothing. Just wind. We stayed until the sun dipped low enough that the hills became shadow shapes. When I finally said we should get going, Jessica nodded and pocketed her phone. We turned back toward the road. That's when I froze. The gate we'd driven through was shut. Not just shut, chain shut. A heavy silver chain looped between the bars, locked with a padlock the size of my fist. Jessica frowned. "Was it like that when we came in?" "No," I said. My voice felt smaller than it should have. "No, it was wide open." She looked around like she expected to see someone standing there. Maybe a rancher? They didn't see us drive in? I shook my head. We'd have heard someone, and they'd have heard us. We walked down to the gate. The chain was tight, the lock cold and smooth, like it had been here a long time. My first thought was that maybe it had been looped there all along and we just hadn't noticed it was unlatched. But I knew that wasn't right. Then Jessica pointed at the ground. "Where are our footprints?" I looked and my stomach turned. The gravel road from the gate to the lookout was smooth. Perfect. Not a single scuff from my boots, no shallow heel marks from her sneakers. Just untouched gravel, like we'd never driven or walked on it. We walked back toward the car, trying to figure out what the hell to do. The road was too narrow to turn around and too steep to just plow through the fence without wrecking my suspension. I still had cell service, so I called the county sheriff's office. It rang twice, then a man answered in a slow drawl. "Sheriff's office." I explained the situation, gave him what I thought were our coordinates. He asked me to repeat them twice, then said, "Son, there's no county property with a scenic lookout out there." "Well, I'm looking at it," I said, my voice shaking. "You ain't hearing me," he said. "Ain't no public road past where you turned off. Been closed since '98. Before I could respond, the call dropped. Full bars 1 second, nothing the next. Jessica's voice broke as she said my name. I turned and saw her standing by the low limestone wall, pointing out toward the hills. "There's someone down there," she whispered. I followed her gaze. At first I didn't see it. Then my eyes caught movement, dark shapes along the tree line. Far below, moving in a slow, deliberate pattern. There were 4, maybe 5 of them. They weren't walking toward us exactly, but their paths seemed to arc in a way that kept turning them our way. "They're coming uphill," Jessica said. We got in the car. I turned on the headlights, but they didn't push back much of the dark. The shadows seemed thicker now, like the light was just bending around them. We sat there, engine idling, watching as the figures below vanished into the dark. Then the sound came. It wasn't footsteps or voices. It was like gravel shifting, but closer, coming from the road behind us, between us and the locked gate. I slammed the car into reverse, thinking maybe I'd back right up to the gate and try ramming it. But as the headlights swept over the gravel road, my heart stopped. The road was gone. Not blocked, not overgrown, gone. The gate was still there, but behind it was just more dark hill. Like there had never been a road cutting through. Jessica started crying, whispering over and over that she wanted to go home. I turned the wheel, gunned the engine, and drove us back up toward the lookout. It was the only open space to turn around, the only place with a view where maybe, just maybe, we could see another road. But when we got back up there, it wasn't the same place. The limestone wall was gone. The cliff was gone. It was just more gravel running right into a dense wall of cedar trees. The air felt wrong, thicker somehow, heavy in my lungs. I cut the engine. We sat there in silence until we heard it again. The chain. It rattled. Once, twice, then slowly, steadily, like someone was unlooping it. I started the engine, floored it, and this time when we came down the hill, the gate was standing open again. The gravel road stretched out to the highway like nothing had happened. We didn't speak until we were 15 miles away, back in a stretch of road I recognized. That's when Jessica asked the question that still keeps me up at night. When we came in, she said, "Did you notice the gate was locked behind us, or did it just close?" I told her I didn't know. And I didn't. But 2 days later, when I drove back there alone in the daylight, I found the turnout on the highway where the sign had been. Only now there was no sign, no gate, just barbed wire running unbroken. Into the woods. And in the gravel where the road should have been, there were footprints. My boots, her sneakers, leading in, but none leading out. The highway was empty except for us, a straight ribbon of 2-lane blacktop cutting through the Texas Panhandle. You can drive for hours out there without seeing more than a flicker of taillights, or the dim orange of a farmhouse light way off. In the fields. That's part of why we took the route. Less traffic, fewer way stations, and a hell of a lot faster than sticking to I-40 with the rest of the truckers. I was riding shotgun in a beat-up Ford F350 with my buddy Travis at the wheel, hauling an empty flatbed back toward Amarillo after a delivery in Dalhart. It was late September, the kind of dry season where the air is sharp with dust even on calm days. I remember thinking the sky was wrong, too pale, almost the color of bone. The sun sat low and mean behind it, like a heat lamp through dirty glass. The wind had been picking up for the last hour, whipping the dry grass along the fence. Lines, tossing grit against the windshield. The Panhandle's good at that. The dust can come from nowhere, choking you before you even notice it's building. But this felt different. The first sign was how quick the horizon went blurry. 1 minute, I could see for miles those endless rows of fence posts, telephone poles like crooked stitches along the road. The next, it was like the world was closing in, the sky bleeding into the ground, everything swallowed by a wall of swirling brown. Dust storm, Travis muttered, leaning forward over the wheel. Big one. I'd been through dust storms before. Out here, they roll in sudden as a sneeze, and you either slow down and pray or pull over and wait it out. But this one wasn't moving the way it should. Instead of sweeping across us, it was bearing straight down the road toward us like a living thing. The wall of grit hit hard, rattling the truck like hail. The world went red-brown, the light dimming to a dirty twilight. The air felt thick, smothering, and the sound wasn't the roar you'd expect. It was softer, almost layered, like 100 dry voices whispering through. Burlap. I reached for the vent controls, trying to cut off the outside air, but even with the windows rolled up tight, the sound seeped in. The voices were indistinct at first, a tide of murmurs slipping under the wind's hiss. Then I caught my own name, clear, right in my ear. Though Travis was on the other side of the cab, I froze, hand hovering over the dash. "Trav," I said. "Slow. Did you hear?" "Yeah." His knuckles were white on the wheel. I heard it. The whispering swelled, dry and sibilant, as if the storm itself had leaned against the glass. Travis's name next, then mine again, then a third name one. I didn't know. The order repeated, unchanging. "Who the hell?" Travis started, but his voice cracked off. Something scraped down the passenger side window. Not claws, not nails, more like 100 grains of sand all moving in the same deliberate path, leaving a faint spiral in the dust clinging to the glass. I stared at it, every hair on my neck prickling. "Pull over," I said. "Hell no," he snapped. "We stop, we're sitting ducks." But the storm didn't feel like something we could outrun. The whispers were inside now, not through the vents or glass, but under my skin, brushing the edges of my thoughts. Every syllable felt like it was made of grit, tiny particles worming deeper. I realized my mouth was dry, not from fear, but because it felt like the storm had stolen all the moisture from the air. A shadow flickered in the dust outside. I could just make out shapes moving in the red haze, pacing the truck on both sides. They didn't walk like people. They slid, shifting with the gusts but never falling behind. No matter how fast Travis drove, they stayed with us. The names kept repeating. Mine, his, that unknown one. The tone didn't change, but there was a pull to it. A slow weight that made it harder to think about anything else. I pressed my palms to my ears, but it didn't help. I don't remember the decision to stop, but I felt the truck slowing, the engine's growl dipping into idle. I turned, startled, to see Travis staring dead ahead, pupils blown wide, his hands loose on the wheel. "Trav?" He didn't answer. His lips were moving with the whispers. The truck rolled to a stop on the shoulder, dust curling and clinging around us like wet smoke. The shadows outside were closer now. One brushed past my window, and the glass frosted not with ice, but with a film of fine dust, each particle trembling as if alive. Shapes formed in it, a handprint. Then another, smaller, as if pressing from the outside in. I reached for the door lock without thinking, but my fingers hovered uselessly over the switch. Something in the sound held me there, head tilted, listening for the next repetition of my name. When it came, it was louder, almost a rasp. Then I understood the order wasn't random. It was a count, mine, Travis's, the unknown one, mine, Travis's, the unknown one. Like a cycle waiting to finish. The third name came again, but this time it wasn't the same as before. It was Travis's wife. I turned, fast to look at him. He was smiling wide, unnatural dust settling in the corners of his eyes. He turned his head slow, like something was moving it for him, and the smile stayed as he said, in a voice like the storm itself, "It knows where she is." That broke whatever was holding me still. I fumbled for the ignition, yanking the shifter. Into drive, stomping the gas. The truck lurched forward, tires spitting gravel. The shadows kept pace at first, then peeled away, swallowed by the wall of grit behind us. The whispers didn't stop. They stayed in the cab until the storm finally thinned, the road reappearing in ragged patches ahead. I didn't speak. Neither did Travis. We drove until Amarillo's lights smeared the horizon. When we finally stopped at a Love's off I-40, the first thing I noticed was the dust. It was still on the inside of the windshield, fine as flour. The spiral was there too, darker now. Each curve made of names written so small I couldn't read them unless I leaned close. Travis wouldn't get out of the truck. He just sat there, staring at nothing. I walked inside to grab water, trying to shake the taste of grit from my mouth. By the time I came back, the driver's seat was empty. The passenger door mine was open, dust swirling inside in the still. His phone was on the dash. The screen was lit, a single text message draft open, no recipient listed. 3 words. It knows now. The names still whisper when it's quiet enough. They don't always start with mine, but they always end with one I don't know yet. I've driven US 281 more times than I can count, northbound from San Antonio through Johnson City, Burnett, and Lampasas before cutting east toward Waco. It's the kind of Texas highway that feels endless in the wrong conditions, blacktop ribboning, between patches of ranch land, cedar breaks, and small towns with single blinking lights that barely register before you're past them. At night, that road gets lonely in a way you can feel in your bones. This happened 2 summers ago on a Sunday night in late August. I'd been down in San Antonio visiting my brother for the weekend, helping him with a busted water heater. I left his place later than I planned, closer to 9 p.m., and figured I'd just make the drive home in one shot. My old Tacoma was solid, I had a thermos of coffee, and the weather was clear. By the time I hit 281, traffic had thinned to almost nothing. It was just me, the hum of my tires, and the smell of mesquite drifting through the open window. Every so often, a set of headlights would appear in my rear view, climb slowly toward me, and either pass or fade away at an exit. About 20 minutes north of Marble Falls, I saw the first hint of trouble. Headlights far back, 2 high beams. Low to the road, dropped behind me quicker than I expected. My first thought was some kid with more truck than sense, maybe a Dodge with a lift kit barreling up to prove something. But as it got closer, I realized it wasn't a pickup. It was a lowboy trailer, the kind they use to haul bulldozers or big generators. Hooked to a cab I couldn't quite make out yet. The thing was moving fast, too fast for a rig pulling that kind of weight, except it wasn't pulling anything. The deck was empty, straps cinched tight to metal rails with ratchet ends clicking in the wind. When it closed in, I gripped the wheel and eased toward the shoulder, figuring he'd roar past. But he didn't. The lowboy stayed planted right on my tail, no more than a car length behind me, those straps vibrating like they were holding something I couldn't see. "All right, buddy," I muttered, tapping my brake lights just enough to send the hint. Nothing. Not even a change in speed. For the next 5 miles, it shadowed me so close I could see the reflective weave in the straps. I rolled my window up halfway and cranked the rear view down because the headlights were burning into my eyes. That's when I noticed something else, no shadow under the trailer. The moon was out, bright enough to paint silver edges on the cedar and mesquite. But where the lowboy should have thrown a clean rectangle onto the asphalt, there was nothing. I told myself it was the glare playing tricks, but the hairs on my arms disagreed. Finally, I spotted a passing lane ahead and pulled to the right, ready to let him by. He took it, swinging wide into the left lane. The cab was an old white Freightliner, the kind with square fenders and mirrors like metal wings. The paint was dull and weather-peeled, and the grille had no badge. The driver's window was down, but the cab's interior was pitch black like someone had cut it out of the night and pasted it there. The lowboy's deck rattled on its shocks as it passed, and my eyes tracked those ratchet straps again. They were cinched tight around nothing, no machine, no crate, but the straps dipped slightly in the middle as if holding weight. Something trailed beneath too. I only caught it for a second before the trailer cleared my hood, but it looked like frayed nylon, dark with grease or something wetter, dragging and sparking faintly against the road. Then it was ahead of me. Easing back into my lane, the smell hit first burnt metal and something sweet-sour underneath. It wafted into my cab through the vents, curling my stomach. I tried to keep distance, but the LeBoy's speed seesawed, forcing me to ride closer. Then I wanted. My high beam swept over the back of the trailer, and that's when I saw movement between the straps. Not much, just the suggestion of something shifting, the kind of ripple you see when an animal breathes under a tarp. The straps would tighten, then slacken slightly, over and over, like a chest rising and falling. I glanced at my speedometer. 62. The road was dead quiet. No other headlights ahead, no taillights behind. Just me and this ghost of a rig, somewhere. Past Lampasas, the LeBoy took an unmarked right onto a county road. I let out a shaky breath and pushed on. But 10 minutes later, headlights bloomed in my rear view again, same height. Same spread. It was behind me. I know that stretch of 281. Well enough to say there's no way it could have come out ahead, looped around, and caught me that fast. Not unless it skipped a whole chunk of highway. I thought about flooring it, but in the dark with deer and hogs liable to bolt from the brush, that felt like trading one danger for another, so I kept steady, watching it gain. The straps were looser, now swaying with the road's curve, and I could see shapes shifting between them. Multiple shapes. I tried calling a buddy who lives near Hiko, but my phone screen froze. Not bad reception frozen. Time in the corner said 11:07 and wouldn't change. When the lowboy pulled up beside me this time, it didn't pass. It just rolled there, pacing me exactly. I turned my head, and the cab's window was still open, but the darkness inside had depth to it, like I was looking down a tunnel. My own reflection stared back faintly, warped across the glass. Then it moved without me moving. The reflection smiled. I jerked my eyes forward, heart pounding so hard my vision pulsed. The lowboy eased ahead again, finally taking the lead. The dragging strap or whatever it was scraped sparks that hissed. Out on the blacktop. I trailed it for maybe 2 more miles before the lights of a small gas station appeared ahead. I swung in hard, figuring I'd wait it out. The lowboy didn't slow. It rolled past, taillights shrinking into the distance until they vanished over a rise. Inside the station, I grabbed a coffee just to have an excuse to stand under the fluorescent glare. The clerk, a wiry guy with a gray ponytail, asked if I was headed north. I said yeah. He gave me a look I didn't like, eyebrows slightly raised, lips pressed thin. "You see a lowboy out there?" he asked. I hesitated. "White cab? Empty deck?" "Empty's one word for it," he said, then leaned an elbow on the counter. "Folks around here see it sometimes. Been like that since the wreck back in '94, hauling a D8 cat up from a quarry. Chain snapped, machine rolled. Driver jackknifed. Trailer flipped, caught fire. They pulled what they could out of the wreck, but most of it." He trailed off, tapping a finger against his temple. Most of it was still strapped down. I asked if anyone ever found the lowboy afterward. "Find it?" He shook his head. "Wasn't nothing to find." Trailer melted near clean through. Cops had to scrape the steel off the asphalt. I left without finishing my coffee. The air outside felt heavier somehow. The last 40 miles home were quiet. No headlights behind me, no weird shadows ahead. But when I pulled into my driveway and stepped out, I noticed something on my rear bumper. A greasy black smear, about the width of a ratchet strap, looped once and cinched tight like it had been. Holding me all the way back, and faint, under the smell of oil, was that same sweet-sour stench. FM 604 runs quiet through the belly of Jones County, Texas, a stretch of cracked asphalt that splits cotton fields and scrub into two long black ribbons. If you drive it in the summer, heat shimmer dances over the horizon, making fence posts waver like they're underwater. But in winter, when the air is brittle and dry, the road feels different, more empty, somehow, like the land itself is holding its breath. I had taken it 100 times before. My aunt's ranch sits just outside Hawley, and the back route was faster than looping down through Abilene. That night, I had left late after staying for dinner pie, and her insistence that I wait till morning because night driving wears the soul thin. I laughed it off, but she hugged me longer than usual when I stepped out into the cold. The moon was just a thin slice over the fields, and the wind carried that smell West Texans. No all too well-dry dirt and something faintly metallic. I was about 5 miles from the nearest turnoff when I saw it. At first, I thought it was a calf. Something black stood dead center in my lane, perfectly still. I eased off the gas, headlights falling across short, coarse fur that didn't reflect light the way most animals' eyes do. No shine, no green, or gold flashback, just two flat, empty black dots in its face. My high beams didn't seem to reach it. Like the brightness stopped short in the air before touching it. It didn't flinch when I slowed to a crawl. I could hear the crunch of gravel under my tires, the hum of the engine lowering to an uneasy idle. The strangest thing was the temperature. My cab had been warm, heater on low, but the closer I got, the colder it became. Not the kind of cold you feel on your skin. This seemed to seep straight into my bones, making my teeth ache. My headlights dimmed, like my battery was dying. Though my dash light stayed bright, I stopped 20 feet from it. My hand hovered over the shifter, my instincts telling me to back up. It stood there, head level with the hood, its shoulders unnaturally high for a dog. Its body was long, lean muscles taut like wire under that black coat. And the smell, God, the smell. It wasn't the musk of a wild animal. It was closer to burnt hair and something sweet gone rotten. It took a step toward me, slow and deliberate. My truck's lights pulsed lower with every movement it made, like each step drained them. I don't know why I didn't just floor it, but something about it made me feel like speeding past would be worse. My chest tightened, breath shallow, like the air was too thick to pull in. That's when it cocked its head. Not a curious tilt, more like a mimicry, like it was studying me and trying to mirror the way humans look at something. The movement was too slow, too precise. My fingers were numb on the steering wheel. When it took another step, I could see its paws weren't quite right. They were long, almost like a coyote's, but the nails clicked against the asphalt in a sharp, deliberate rhythm. The pads seemed too narrow, almost skeletal. The radio crackled. It wasn't on. Static hissed for half a second before a voice. Cut through, low and rasping, like someone whispering into an old phone line. I couldn't make out the words, just the rhythm of them, fast and urgent. My stomach rolled with sudden nausea. Then the thing's mouth opened. Its jaw hung low, too low, skin stretching in odd places like it hadn't been designed to open that far. But it didn't bark or growl. Instead, I heard that same whisper, perfectly matched, like it had been coming from its throat the whole time. I slammed the truck into reverse. The tires squealed, gravel spitting from under them. The black dog didn't move out of the way, it just stood there as the distance between us grew. My lights brightened again, the cold easing as I backed down the road, keeping my eyes locked on it. When I had maybe 50 feet between us, it finally moved, but it didn't walk off the road. It stepped backward, perfectly in sync with my reversing speed, keeping its head locked on mine. It moved without the bob of natural motion, just gliding backward until my stomach dropped. My rearview mirror showed nothing behind me but empty road and cotton stubble, but when I looked forward again, it was gone. I didn't turn around. I backed up until I found a wide enough patch to spin the truck around and took the long way back. Through Abilene, white-knuckling the wheel the whole time. When I got home, my porch light wouldn't come on. Every bulb in the kitchen flickered when I walked in, even though the power bill was paid and the wiring had never given me trouble. The cold clung to me like I'd stepped out of a freezer. I didn't tell anyone for a couple of days. Not until I mentioned it to a mechanic buddy who grew up near Hawley. I laughed it off, called it some big stray, but the look on his face made me stop. He asked if it stood in the road and didn't move, if the air got cold, if the lights went dim. When I said yes, he leaned in, voice low. That's not a stray. People around here call it the black dog. Been seen since my granddad's time. They say it walks FM 604 and other farm roads when it's hunting. Not for food, just for someone to follow it or try to pass it. Folks who do, they don't make it home. I wanted to ask more, but he wouldn't say another word. Just shook his head and went back to work. 2 nights later, I woke up to the sound of claws on my porch boards. Slow, deliberate clicks in the same rhythm I'd heard on the road. The motion light stayed dark. The air in my bedroom turned cold enough that I could see my breath. From the window, I couldn't see much in the dark yard. But right before the sound stopped, the static hiss came again. No radio this time, just the faintest whisper curling through the walls of my house, speaking words I still couldn't understand. I haven't driven FM 604 since. And every now and then, when I step outside on a cold night, I catch the faintest whiff of burnt hair and something sweet just before. The lights around me seem to fade. I think it's still looking for me. It was late September when we were pushing southbound on I-35, hauling a load of heavy equipment out of Kansas and into Laredo. I was riding shotgun, my buddy Carl behind the wheel, the hum of the diesel a steady backdrop to the miles rolling by. We'd both been running long hours that week, the kind of stretches where coffee stops feeling like caffeine and starts feeling like hot water. The weather had been fine all day, that dry Texas heat flattening the horizon under a sun that seemed nailed in place. But as we crossed into Hill County and pushed toward Waco, the light started to change, turning thin, like it was being filtered through gauze. The CB crackled to life just as the sky took on that strange dusty shade. Now, truckers will tell you the CB is both the best and worst part of the road. It's good for traffic heads-ups, bear reports, weather warnings. It's also a highway barroom where nonsense flows freely. But this wasn't that. The first voice that came through was shaking. Northbound, southbound, any driver? Y'all hearing this? Mile marker 338 to 334, stay clear if you can. Something's wrong. Carl reached for the mic, frowning. Breaker 19, Hill County southbound here. What's your 20? What's the trouble? There was a long, wet hiss of static, like somebody exhaling too close to the mic. Then, a reply, you'll know when you get there, if you get there. That was it. No laughter, no chuckle to show it was a prank. Just silence and the faint sound of something tapping the mic casing before it clicked off. Carl shot me a look that said he wasn't sure whether to laugh or not. I shrugged, leaning forward to watch the road ahead. The air seemed thicker somehow. The way it gets before a thunderstorm, except the sky was empty of clouds. We rolled another mile before the CB came alive again. This time, it was a woman's voice, low and rushed. "They're standing in the median again. Don't stop, don't slow. Just keep your lights on them. They'll try to flag you. You'll want to stop. Don't." Carl pressed the transmit. "Ma'am, where exactly are you seeing?" Her voice overrode his, louder now. "You're coming up on them. Don't stop. Don't make eye contact." Then silence. Not the normal static quiet, but a kind of hollow absence that made the hair on my arms rise. The CB display flickered, the channel number flashing even though neither of us had touched it. That's when we heard ourselves. Not someone talking like us. Ourselves. My voice came first. Calm but tight. Yeah, this is southbound equipment. Hauler, we've got eyes on something in the road, need a northbound to confirm." Then Carl's voice. "Christ, there? They're all the same face. Don't look at them, don't, oh God." The transmission cut off in a squeal of feedback. Carl looked at me, his knuckles bone white on the wheel. "That wasn't." "Meh," he said. I didn't answer. My throat had gone dry, and I realized I'd been gripping the dash hard enough to make my fingers ache. We were still a few miles north of 334 by my reckoning, but the CB kept spitting our voices back at us, mixed in with sounds I couldn't place. Sometimes it was just breathing. Sometimes it was like someone dragging a chain across concrete. Sometimes it was voices not ours calling out in that flat, emotionless way a GPS does, naming off exits we hadn't reached yet. The road ahead dipped slightly, and that's when I saw them dot at first. They looked like people standing along. The median facing the road. Men, women, maybe a dozen in total, spaced evenly apart. No cars nearby, no reason for them to be there. They were too still, too straight. Their clothes looked old, sun-faded, and the skin on their faces had a washed-out gray-brown tint like they'd been carved from driftwood. The worst part was their eyes, or what should have been their eyes. Every face had the same blank, pale discs, no irises, no pupils, like someone had pressed boiled eggs into their sockets. Carl's speed dipped before I could say anything. I heard my own voice again on the CB. "Don't stop, don't stop, don't." Then it cut. The nearest one stepped forward, not into the lane, but just enough that the edge of their boot crossed into the pavement. Their head tilted slightly, like a dog hearing something in the distance. My stomach turned cold, and I could swear the temperature inside the cab dropped with it. I didn't think, I just shouted at Carl to keep going. The CB screamed to live feedback so sharp it hurt, and then a new voice, deep and guttural. "You're almost here." I grabbed the mic, snapped back. "We're not stopping." The reply came slow, each word dripping through the speaker. "You already did." We passed the last of them, and for a second I thought it was over. Then I realized the highway didn't look right. The billboards we'd passed 15 minutes ago were still there, same peeling paint, same bent metal. The mile marker said 338 again. Carl didn't say a word, but he pressed the accelerator until the engine roared. The CB hissed, clicked, and played back the sound of the engine revving, then a voice, mine again, but whispering now. "Don't. Let them get in the cab." Carl slammed the radio off, but the sound kept coming, muffled like it was coming from the sleeper behind us. I turned in my seat, my gut knotting tight, and saw the curtain between the cab and sleeper was pulled shut. We hadn't closed it. Something moved behind it. It was small at first, just a ripple along the fabric, but it grew, pressing outward in slow pulses, like someone was leaning on it from inside. The shape wasn't right for a person, too narrow at the top, too wide at the bottom. The smell hit next, a wet metallic reek that filled my mouth like blood does when you bite your tongue. My skin prickled all over, the curtain parted an inch. enough for me to see a pale, round surface slide through the gap. It was an eye. A single, lidless, pale disc, just like the ones on the people in the median pushing into the cab like it. Had weight and mass. Carl swerved hard, nearly taking us onto the shoulder. The eye withdrew, curtain falling still. The CB, even with the power switch off, whispered, "Mile marker 334. When we passed it actually passed it, the road ahead brightened. The sky looked normal again. No figures in the median. No wrong billboards. I glanced at the dash clock. We'd lost 47 minutes. We didn't talk much after that. Hauled straight through to Laredo, dropped the load, and found separate motels for the night. Carl didn't answer my calls after that trip. A month later, I heard from another driver he'd quit long haul entirely, sold his rig, and left Texas. Still run the same route sometimes. I keep the CB off now, just in case. But every once in a while, when I'm pushing through Hill County at night, the speaker will hiss without power. And I'll hear my own voice saying something I haven't lived through yet. The last time it happened, just last week, it was whispering, "We're almost there." We were somewhere south of Victoria, Texas, the sun melting into the horizon when we started seeing the signs. Big green reflective boards with white lettering. Every few miles. Port Brewer 42. The name didn't mean anything to me. I'd grown up in Texas, driven most of its highways at one point or another, and I'd never heard of it. "You ever heard of that place?" I asked Mason, who was hunched over the wheel of his Tacoma, tapping the steering wheel in time with some old Alan Jackson song playing low on the radio. He squinted. "Nope, sounds like one of those shrimping towns. My cousin used to haul loads of Gulf shrimp up from Port Aransas. Could be one of those, just a little further down the coast." The problem was, we weren't heading to the coast. We were supposed to be heading inland, away from it, taking a long scenic loop toward Houston after finishing a delivery job in Corpus Christi. It was mid-August, heavy with that wet coastal air that sticks to your skin like plastic wrap, but the GPS had us on a back route with long stretches of empty road. The ocean should have been behind us by now. We didn't think much of it at first. Towns pop up all over the map in Texas, places with a single post office and a diner, and maybe a grain silo that counts as a landmark. But the second sign came 5 minutes later, and the number had dropped to Port Brewer -38. Mason glanced at me, a little crease in his forehead. "That's weird. We haven't taken any turns." We kept going. The third sign came at 31 miles, then 25, and then 21. The sun dipped fully below the tree line, and the shadows in the ditches on either side of the two-lane highway deepened into pools of black that seemed to cling to the edges of our headlights. It got harder to tell how fast we were moving. "GPS still good?" Mason asked. I checked my phone. The blue dot was pulsing, but the road name was wrong, something like Farm to Market 1874, and it didn't show any towns ahead for miles. No Port Brewer. Just a long gray line stretching into nothing. "Nothing on the map," I said. "That's bull," Mason muttered. "We're getting signs. Dot doesn't just throw those up for fun." We drove on a little faster now, like maybe if we kept moving, we'd pass whatever weird stretch of road we'd hit. The air through the open window smelled faintly of salt, but that could have just been leftover from Corpus. At least that's what I told myself. When the next sign appeared, Port Brewer 17, the air smelled stronger. Not the fresh, breezy salt smell you get near the beach, but something sharper, mixed with a sour undertone, like rotting seaweed left to bake in the sun. Mason rolled up his window. "We're not supposed to be anywhere near the damn water." I didn't argue. We passed a farmhouse a few minutes later. Or, at least, I think it was a farmhouse. The windows were boarded from the inside, and the front door hung open. A single floodlight glowed above the porch, casting long, distorted shadows across the gravel drive. I thought I saw someone standing in the yard, but the light slid past too quickly to be sure. We didn't stop Dot by the time we hit Port Brewer 8. Fog had begun curling across the asphalt. It came in low, hugging the ground, glowing faintly. In our high beams, Mason flicked on the fog lights, and the beams caught something reflective up ahead, a road sign. Only this one didn't have a number. It just said, Port Brewer, turn H Erie. The arrow pointed right, down a narrower road that disappeared into the fog. We're not, I started, but Mason was already slowing down. What's the harm? Maybe we find a gas station, get a drink, figure out where the hell we are. The turnoff was paved but cracked, weeds sprouting in the gaps. It felt wrong immediately. The fog thickened the moment we left the highway, muting the sound of the tires on the road. The trees closed in overhead, branches arching together like they were shutting us in. The smell of the ocean was stronger now, and my stomach turned. We didn't see any more houses. No lights, just that tunnel of trees and fog and the occasional glint of moisture on the pavement. After 10 minutes, I realized something was off. Mason, I said slowly, shouldn't the water be on our left? He frowned. Yeah, if we're heading to the coast, yeah. I looked out the window. To our right, through the fog, I could see it, a shimmer of dark water, faint moonlight glinting off its surface. Waves rolled and broke, slow and heavy, as if we were driving parallel to the shoreline. We both went quiet. The road curved, hugging the water. The fog thinned enough for us to see a low seawall, and beyond it, the endless black stretch of ocean. Only it wasn't the Gulf. The swells were too big, the water too dark, and the sound God. The sound, it wasn't the rhythmic crash of waves. It was deeper, slower, like the ocean was breathing. We passed another sign. Welcome to Port Brewer. Pop at 0, that was when I noticed the sky. It wasn't night anymore. Not exactly. The stars were wrong, too close together, too bright, and shifting ever so slightly, like reflections on water. The road ended at a cluster of buildings that might have once been a fishing town. Wooden piers jutted into the dark water, many of them broken or half submerged. The buildings leaned at odd angles, their windows dark. Except for one, a squat little bait shop with peeling paint and a flickering neon sign that read open. Mason pulled into the dirt lot, killed the engine, and we sat there for a moment, neither of us moving. The fog swirled around the truck, and somewhere out on the water, something surfaced with a wet, sucking sound. I'm not getting out, I said. Mason looked pale, but he grabbed his wallet. I'm just gonna ask where the hell we are. I watched him walk to the bait shop. The bell over the door jingled when he went in, and then nothing. No voices. No movement. Just the faint flicker of that neon sign. Minutes passed. Finally, the door opened. Mason stepped out, but he wasn't holding his wallet anymore. His hands hung at his sides, limp, and his eyes were wrong, too wide. The pupils blown so big they swallowed the irises. He opened the passenger door and got in without looking at me. Drive? He said. I didn't ask. We left the town, the fog swallowing it behind us. Only the road didn't take us back to the highway. It wound tighter and tighter, the ocean switching sides again, until I didn't know which way we were going. The signs started appearing again. Port Brewer. 42 Port Brewer -38. Mason hasn't spoken since. We've been driving for hours. The fuel gauge hasn't moved. Every time we pass a sign, my phone battery drops by 10%. But the screen never changes, it just shows that endless gray line. And the worst part? No matter which way we turn, the ocean keeps showing up on the wrong side of the car.